Chapter 109. Li Tianlan carefully put down the plaque with the words, East Emperor Palace. When he looked back at the living room, he was suddenly shocked. The whole living room was already in a mess, much more exaggerated than being robbed. The floor, the walls, the ceiling, and all the places visible to the naked eye were all covered with ravines caused by the sword qi. The shallowest one was 4 to 5 centimeters deep. Large pieces of white ash fell from the walls. When the sword qi swept across, it fell everywhere. There was almost nothing intact in the living room. The leather sofa, which was originally of good quality, was cut everywhere, and the 2 wooden chairs had fallen apart. The water cup and kettle were completely smashed. The water inside flowed freely and condensed with the white ash in the place, turning into mud. The TV and the air conditioner all had dense cracks. Except for himself and the plaque in front of him, everything in the living room was broken into a mess as if it had experienced the end of the world. Li Tianlan touched his nose subconsciously. Such a scene, even he, the initiator, was a little awestruck. Last night was the night when the sword intent in his chest was at its peak. All kinds of emotions, such as resentment, hatred, killing intent, unwillingness, helplessness, and doubt, gathered together and finally turned into the purest sword intent to express, turning into the 3 words East Emperor Palace on the plaque. His mind was immersed in the past, immersed in martial arts. It was a pure world full of saber lights and sword shadows. That magical state made his heart clear and absent-minded. Although it was not meditation, it was several times better than meditation. Overnight, he went straight from the stabilization phase of the qi-controlling realm to the peak phase, and achieved the primary level of the shadow formula. Such a harvest was already great, but Li Tianlan thought that the most wonderful state was that. Even if he woke up now and recalled the state last night, he still felt the aftertaste was endless. Vaguely, there seemed to be sword intent accumulating and condensing in his heart. But looking at the messy living room in front of him, Li Tianlan, who had completely returned to reality, could only smile bitterly. He didn't know how many credits he, Li Beitian, and Ning Qianqing would be deducted for messing up the dormitory. He also didn't know whether he could make the old headmaster bend the rules because of his relationship with the headmaster. Li Tianlan stretched, lit a cigarette, and went to the bedroom to have a look. But no one was there. The sun rose outside the window, and the night faded. He was in a daze for a while, and for a moment, he had a feeling that he didn't know what year it was. Creak! The security door of the dormitory was gently pulled open by someone. Wang Yuetong walked in cautiously. Seeing Li Tianlan smoking in the living room, she instantly breathed a sigh of relief and said with a smile, "Senior brother, have you finished writing?" As he spoke, Li Beitian and Ning Qianqing stood outside the dormitory. Yu Qingyan and Yi Huayu walked into the dormitory one by one and came to the living room. F***CK, what's going on? Is it haunted? Or were you robbed? The first thing Li Beitian saw was the mess in the living room. He was stunned. Not only him, but the others who saw the scene in the living room were also stunned. Yesterday, Wang Yuetong had been guarding the door after she went out. Even when they came back, she would not let them in. At first, Li Beitian and Ning Qianqing did not pay much attention to it. But as they waited longer and longer, they gradually felt that something was wrong. From yesterday afternoon to this morning, the few people standing at the door could only vaguely feel that there was a pure and awe-inspiring sword intent in the dormitory becoming more and more condensed. But who would have thought that? In less than a day, the whole living room was destroyed like this by Li Tianlan. Was he writing or was he doing damage? There was a small accident. Li Tianlan looked a little unnatural. He took a puff of his cigarette and said, "I'll go to the headmaster later. The dormitory probably needs to be renovated." "Don't make a sound." Li Beitian, who seemed to be in a strange state of mind, suddenly opened his mouth. He did not make a fuss, but said something in a low voice. Li Tianlan was stunned. But he saw that Li Beitian, who had been smiling most of the time, looked unusually serious and serious. His eyes kept moving around the living room, carefully observing every sword mark on the walls and ceiling. His eyes became brighter and more fanatical and joyful. Ning Qianqing was also thoughtful. Ignoring the sofa and electrical appliances in the living room that could no longer be used, and only looking at the walls at first glance, the 4 walls seemed to be in a mess because of the sword qi. They looked extremely ugly. But if one looked closely, the walls of the living room seemed to have a different charm under the sword marks. The sword marks went from shallow to deep, and the sword intent grew from nothing to something, from light to heavy. They were displayed in front of people one by one. They were messy and fragmented, but they had a violence and sharpness that was almost suffocating. In the eyes of warriors, such ugliness was actually beautiful, and it was the most powerful aesthetic. It seemed that every sword mark on the wall was worth looking at carefully. Li Baiqian's eyes flashed faster and faster. As the great void swordmaster of Mount Shu, he could feel the illusory great void sword intent. His talent could be imagined. Now the sword marks appeared in front of him, and the extremely pure sword intent kept surprising him. The bottleneck that had been bothering him for a long time began to loosen in the sword marks. Li Baiqian actually felt that he was about to break through. Tianlan, have you finished writing? Li Baiqian suddenly turned around and looked at Li Tianlan with solemn eyes. Li Tianlan nodded and pointed to the plaque on the side with its back facing the crowd. The 3 words, East Emperor Palace, on the plaque were too sharp. It was something that needed time to wash away. Looking at it now, it was still a little dazzling. Li Baiqian walked over without saying a word and turned over the plaque. The 3 words, East Emperor Palace, appeared completely in front of Li Baiqian. They were not flamboyant and flamboyant, but 3 upright words. Every stroke was majestic. The upright regular script gave people a feeling of arrogance and unruly like cursive. Li Baiqian subconsciously narrowed his eyes and faced the sharpness, but his pupils were getting brighter and brighter. The sword intent, like a vast ocean, circled in every stroke. At first, the sword intent was light, and there was a kind of attitude that made all things surrender. The surging sword intent reached its peak from the word, Emperor. The sword intent of the last word was restrained, and the killing intent was monstrous, as if the sky was falling and the earth was cracking. The 3 big words, East Emperor Palace, seemed to have completely disappeared in front of Li Baiqian. There was only sword and sword intent in his eyes. Every stroke of the 3 words, even the slightest turn, seemed to be explaining what the extreme of the sword was. Li Baiqian breathed rapidly, and his eyes were wild with joy. He had been stuck at the threshold of the peak of the ice-condensing realm or even the fulfillment for a long time. Now he finally found the opportunity to break through to the fire-flaming realm. Even if his senior brother really wanted to compete with him after he sobered up, he would not be willing to erase the 3 words when he saw them, would he? The words were sharp and dazzling. Li Tianlan's eyes instinctively welled up with tears, but he was smiling quietly and contentedly. I have gained something. He looked at the plaque in front of him and said seriously and affirmatively, I have thought about something. Ning Qianqing, who was also looking at the plaque, said slowly in a dignified and joyful tone. The 2 turned to look at Li Tianlan at the same time. The 3 words gave them too much inspiration. What about Li Tianlan, who wrote the 3 words himself? What would he gain? I have achieved something. Li Tianlan chuckled. He had achieved the basic level of the shadow formula, and his realm had taken a step forward. Li Tianlan's combat capability had improved again, and he even vaguely touched the fulfillment and even the limit of the qi-controlling realm. The goal that Tribulation gave him was to break through the qi-controlling realm and enter the ice-condensing realm in 3 years. But now Li Tianlan was sure that he could break through in the most perfect state in 1 year at most. He turned his head and looked at the 3 words he had written. The 3 words had inadvertently brought his sword, his heart, and his Tao to another level. This was the most affirming gain. That's good. It's the best. Li Baiqian laughed and looked at Li Tianlan seriously. Tianlan, put the plaque here first. Qianqing and I have to study it carefully. Li Tianlan nodded indifferently and did not say much. Wang Yuetong took out a form from her bag and said, 3I came again later, but I didn't let her in. She asked me to give this form to you. Senior brother, please fill it out as soon as possible. Li Tianlan took it and looked at it. It was a form for the establishment of a new structure in the special warfare system, including the name of the organization, staffing, office location, required equipment, and so on. Li Tianlan frowned. He had no experience in this kind of thing. He thought for a while and said directly, Baiqian and Qianqing are the 2 deputy directors on the form. Yuetong, I'll be your secretary. Wang Yuetong said with a cheerful smile. Yes. If there's something, I'll do it. If there's nothing, I'll do it. Li Baiqian, who was still staring at the plaque, replied casually. Wang Yuetong's face instantly turned red. Although she had prepared for this in private, It was still too shameful for this bastard to say it out. She glared at Li Baitian and said bitterly, "Li Taishu, say it again?" Li Baitian's body trembled. When he heard this annoying name, he felt weak in an instant. Ahem, I'm sorry. I said something wrong. He gave a hollow laugh and did not even dare to look back. Then it settled. Fill Yuetong's name in the secretary column. Li Tianlan nodded calmly. In fact, he felt that Li Baitian's words were simply a famous saying. When he thought of it, he felt secretly happy, didn't he? As for Qing Yan, she still needs to be tempered. She will follow Qianqing as an assistant first. Baitian, Huayu is your martial niece. You can arrange it. He waved the documents in his hand, shook his head and sighed. For the time being, we can handle the core personnel. We will take them in later. It seems that we still need to find a time to go out. The office staff, the office address and so on. It doesn't seem to be a big matter, but there are a lot of things to do, so we have to arrange them well. My sister called me once last night. Wang Yuetong said in a clear voice. She asked you to call Senior Yu. After you fill out the form, you can leave this matter to Senior Yu. As for the office location, my sister has already chosen it for you. Senior Yu will also close Yu's private restaurant and go to take charge of the new institution. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows slightly and asked curiously, "Where is the office location?" "I don't know." Wang Yuetong shook her head honestly. "It seems to be a club before. I didn't ask much." Li Tianlan nodded, hesitating whether he should go and have a look in person. Wang Yuetong seemed to know what he was thinking and continued. "And, senior brother, even if you want to go out, you can't go out for the time being. The Sky Academy will officially start classes tomorrow, and the timetable has been issued. The first class is the actual combat lesson, which is the highlight. You can't miss it." Li Tianlan was stunned and seemed to be thinking. Chapter 110. When he woke up from the dreamy dream, it was already morning outside the window. The weather was gloomy, and it seemed to be raining. Li Tianlan held the white and tender body in his arms, a little lost in thought. Wang Yuetong didn't leave. Then, he entered the bedroom in a dignified manner. Overnight, a man and a woman, a bed and a quilt in the same room, did everything that could be done except what should have happened. If today's actual combat lesson didn't require a perfect physical state, what should and shouldn't have happened might have happened last night. Actual combat lesson. Li Tianlan, who was in a trance, finally woke up. The Sky Academy's organization was extremely simple, roughly divided into the teaching office, the political department, the tactical staff department, the drill department, the logistics department, and the library. Literally, it was not difficult to see the role of these departments, and the relatively simple environment of the Sky Academy could be roughly seen through these departments. This was the place to cultivate talents for the special warfare system of Jianghu State. With a simple organization, there would be less intrigue, and some teachers would have more time to arrange the courses in the academy. Therefore, compared with a simple organization in the Sky Academy, the courses in the academy were extremely complicated. The 13 courses almost covered all the skills needed in the special warfare system. Mechanical control, gun control, physical training, tactical study, lurking and camouflage, sniping, investigation, assassination, security, electronic intrusion, torture and meditation, intelligence collection and analysis, and actual combat lesson. Strictly speaking, none of the 13 courses was useless, and they were all extremely important. But the actual combat lesson was the most special of all the courses, because it was an actual combat lesson. In other subjects, even the cold and treacherous assassination lesson, it was mostly teaching and telling. Even if there was a fight, it was also a drill. On the other hand, the combat lesson was a naked fight to the death. It was a battle between students with all their might. Under normal circumstances, such a course should not be held too early. At least, the Sky Academy would try to hold an actual combat lesson after they had a general understanding of all the students, to verify the students' learning gains, and to point out each student's shortcomings, so as to make targeted improvements. Li Tianlan had heard from Wang Yuetong that the previous freshmen of the Sky Academy were basically like this. But the first official lesson of this session was actual combat. Such an arrangement meant that the Sky Academy had tightened the nerves of every student from the beginning, making the competitive atmosphere in the academy unprecedentedly strong. Thinking of the other news that Wang Yuetong had told him last night when they were aroused, Li Tianlan was lost in thought. According to Wang Yuetong, the first class was the actual combat lesson, which was just the beginning. Later, other lists would soon appear in the Sky Academy, such as the Academy Combat Power List, the Credit List, and the Potential List. It was said that the Sky Academy and the Deep Sea Academy were still working hard to promote the elimination system and the life and death arena. But this proposal was shelved in Kunlun City. But judging from all kinds of news, the Sky Academy and the Deep Sea Academy seemed to have formed a tacit understanding, so the reform this time became so radical. Although the elimination system and the life and death arena were put on hold, the release of each list was bound to cause a new round of endless competition. Those who could come to the Special Warfare Academy were all outstanding people. Who would be willing to submit to others? Li Tianlan took a deep breath and slowly exhaled. The actual combat lesson was based on the class, and the 50 people in Li Tianlan's class were almost the 50 strongest people in the whole academy. Li Tianlan had seen the information of many of them from Qin Wei Bai. If he hadn't returned to the peak of the Qi-controlling realm yesterday, it would have been really difficult to deal with such an actual combat. Wang Yuetong, who was nestled in Li Tianlan's arms, moved. Her long eyelashes fluttered, and she opened her eyes in a daze. "You're awake." Li Tianlan glanced at her and said with a natural smile, "Get ready to get up. It's time for class." Wang Yuetong, who was sharing a bed with a man for the first time, felt peaceful and happy, with a trace of almost instinctive shyness. She gently moved her body, removed Li Tianlan's hand on her hip, and whispered with a smile, "My hand is dead." Li Tianlan coughed, and his eyes were hot. If it weren't for the actual combat lesson today, he could have eaten this charming little vixen whole last night. Now, feeling her delicate body hiding in the quilt, Li Tianlan's heart was really regretful and expectant. The so-called capricious mind was just like this. I gave you a chance before, but you didn't want it. Now it's useless to regret it. Wang Yuetong giggled, pursed her rosy lips, and pointed to the wardrobe beside the bed. Senior brother, help me get underwear. Whichever color you like. Li Tianlan said yes, and didn't deliberately choose. He opened a small box in the wardrobe for underwear, took a set of black underwear, and went to bed. He smiled and said, "Do you want me to help you put it on?" Wang Yuetong's little face was red, and she rolled her eyes at him. She whispered, "Didn't you bully me enough last night? You're so annoying." She reached out and pinched Li Tianlan. Her eyes were bitter, and it seemed that she was really wronged. Li Tianlan looked embarrassed. Thinking about what he did last night, it seemed that he really went too far. In a way, the little princess of the Wang family of Beihai was indeed bullied by him last night. Wang Yuetong bit her lip and pinched Li Tianlan again. Suddenly, she giggled and said, "Do you like women kneeling in front of you so much? Brother-in-law? Did my sister spoil you too much?" Li Tianlan could handle this kind of private conversation between young couples, but the thought of talking about Qin Wei Bai while lying in bed with Wang Yuetong made him uncomfortable all over. He got up from the bed and quickly changed into the camouflage uniform. Stiffly, he changed the topic. "I'll go out and have a look. It's almost time. Get dressed and come out quickly." Wang Yuetong sat on the bed and giggled. She looked at Li Tianlan's back with infatuation in her eyes. She didn't expect this man to be so domineering in bed. He was simply a tyrant who did whatever he wanted. Although she felt wronged because of being bullied by him last night, Wang Yuetong didn't feel uncomfortable when she thought about it. She thought silently, and her face became redder and redder. For a while, she sat on the bed and didn't move for a long time. In the living room, Li Beitian and Ning Qianqing had already gotten up. They stood in front of the plaque again, carefully studying the sword intent contained in the words, East Emperor Palace. Sounds came from the kitchen from time to time. Yu Qingyan and Yi Huayu were busy in the kitchen. On the first day of the establishment of the East Emperor Palace, the 6 core people stayed here last night. There were 3 bedrooms. Li Tianlan and Wang Yuetong had one, Yu Qingyan and Yi Huayu had another, and Li Beitian and Ning Qianqing had another. It was just right. Morning. Li Tianlan took out a cigarette, put it in his mouth, and said casually. Li Beitian waved his hands slightly. The sword intent rose and fell in the living room, and a bit of heat suddenly appeared. The cigarette in front of Li Tianlan had been lit, and the smoke drifted away. Li Beitian looked calm and said inscrutably, "Morning." Even Ning Qianqing, who was known as Posturing Cheng, would have to admit defeat. Li Tianlan didn't mind. He just smiled with a little surprise and said, "Are you in the fire-flaming realm?" "Of course. You're just in the fire-flaming realm. You can enter it easily. Give me a little more time, and I'll enter the thunder-shocking realm or even the invincible realm." Li Beitian looked generous and unafraid. "You're so pretentious. You're such a genius, but you're still slower than me." Ning Qianqing looked disdainful. "You're talking about entering the thunder-shocking realm or the invincible realm. If it weren't for the words Tianlan, I don't know how long you'll be stuck in the fire-flaming realm, right?" Li Tianlan waved his hand and interrupted their bickering. He said with a smile, "Anyway, it's a good thing to break through before the actual combat lesson starts. Try to get a good ranking today. The first place of the actual combat lesson would be rewarded with 15 credits, the second to fifth would be rewarded with 10 credits, and the top 10 would be rewarded with 3 credits. Li Tianlan had to fight for these credits. Well, I hope Beitian and I can meet some tough opponents and create some trouble for them first. Tianlan, you just try your best to get points. It's good enough that we can graduate. Whether the East Emperor Palace can really become the East Emperor Palace or not, your credits are the most important." Ning Qianqing nodded and said. Li Beitian smiled and winked at the bedroom. "I'm afraid that Tianlan fought too much last night, and I don't know if he still has the strength to face the opponents today. Every minute of the night is worth 1,000 pounds of gold. It's okay, even if you fail today, it doesn't matter. We all understand." "Understand your ass." Li Tianlan scolded with a smile and rubbed Li Beitian's hair. "It's time to eat." Yu Qingyan's sweet voice sounded in the kitchen, and the dining room was already filled with the fragrance of food. Li Tianlan looked at Ning Qianqing and had an idea. He suddenly whispered, "Qianqing, think of a way to get Qingyan. She's a treasure. When we live together, we'll eat and drink well every day." "Tut tut. Go away, go away. Fuck you. She's my future wife. Not a nanny." The actual combat lesson started at 7:30 in the morning and ended at 7 o'clock in the evening. It lasted for nearly 12 hours. Li Tianlan and the others did not waste any time. They rushed to the #1 training ground as soon as they finished eating. The training ground did not cover a large area. It was a flat land covering an area of about 50 acres. There were about 20 high platforms on it, clean and tidy, looking very solemn. This was not only the location of the actual combat lesson, but also the place where the elites of the two academies competed with each other if the main venue of the maneuver of the two academies was the Sky Academy. Therefore, there was also a rostrum not far from the training ground. When Li Tianlan and the others arrived, there was already a solemn and silent square formation in front of the #1 training ground. A middle-aged man with a dark face stood motionless in front of the square formation. "I'm not late." Ning Qianqing looked at his watch and said. Li Tianlan nodded and walked over quickly. He stood up straight and said, "Report." The man with a dark face in front of the square formation glanced at him coldly and then looked down at his watch. He did not say much but said coldly, "Get in line." Li Tianlan responded. The 6 of them stood neatly in the last row. "All right." The man with a dark face glanced at the square formation in front of him and said coldly, "Everyone is here. Let me introduce myself. My name is Yang Mengjiang, the leader of the lesson group of the actual combat lesson and also your teacher for the next 3 years." He paused and then continued, "I don't want to talk nonsense. The Sky Academy attaches great importance to combat strength, so the actual combat lesson is one of the most important courses in the Sky Academy. It has high credits and high intensity. In the actual combat, injuries are inevitable. Therefore, I advise you that if you can't hold on, you can admit defeat, and the price is only 1 credit. Do you have anything to say?" There was silence. Yang Mengjiang waited for a few seconds and directly waved his hand. He grabbed a small box in the air and said, "Since no one has any objections, let's draw lots. From now on, I will carefully observe each battle and point out any shortcomings. We have plenty of time in this class, so we can only use platform #2. Li Tianlan silently observed the leader of the actual combat lesson. There was no doubt that Yang Mengjiang's realm was at least at the beginning of the thunder-shocking realm since he was able to take this position. He looked to be in his 40s, or even younger. His age combined with his realm was quite rare. The most important thing was that he seemed to speak and do things very straightforwardly, showing a kind of soldier's decisiveness, which could make people feel good about him. Senior brother, he is one of the core figures of Kunlun City and Gu Yunxia's confidant. I heard from my second uncle that the position of deputy director of teaching, if Lu Xiuwei hadn't acted quickly, would have belonged to Yang Mengjiang. After Lu Xiuwei's death, the new candidate recommended by the Sky Academy was also Yang Mengjiang, Wang Yuetong said in a low voice. Wang Yuetong said in a low voice. This man was born in the army. At the beginning, he was just an ordinary special forces soldier. In 20 years, he reached the thunder-shocking realm step by step. His strength was gained through fighting. Although he didn't master many unique skills, he had a firm will. His actual combat ability is very strong. Making him the leader of the actual combat lesson is definitely the best use of his talent. Li Tianlan slightly narrowed his eyes and said yes. The box in Yang Mengjiang's hand was passed among the phalanx and soon reached Li Tianlan's hand. Li Tianlan randomly drew a number and opened it to have a look. It was number 26. In front of the phalanx, Yang Mengjiang's voice sounded again. Don't waste time. I'll just say the number randomly. Those who are called can come to the stage directly. This is the actual combat lesson. Don't talk so much nonsense. If you can fight, fight. If you can't, get off. Number 3, number 5, come to the stage. Number 3. Number 5. Li Tianlan didn't feel anything, but Li Beitian and Ning Qianqing beside him stiffened at the same time. Damn it, there's a shady deal. There's definitely a shady deal. What the F***ck? Li Beitian forced himself to lower his voice and said incoherently. He opened the number in his hand and saw a number written neatly on it. Next to him, the number in Ning Qianqing's hand was 5. The first battle of the first actual combat lesson of the Sky Academy. Ning Qianqing met Li Beitian. Chapter 111. Other than fate, the only explanation for such a painful outcome was coincidence. Ning Qianqing met Li Beitian. Li Tianlan did not believe that there was any shady business involved. The 50 people drew lots at the same time and each number was different. Unless Yang Mengjiang was an immortal, it was impossible for him to know the numbers that Li Beitian and Ning Qianqing had drawn. Yang Mengjiang could not help but be convinced by his casual call. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Li Tianlan was silent for 2 seconds and said softly, after all, it's an actual combat lesson. It's a good opportunity. Let's take it as a way to get to know each other better. From the point of view of snatching credits, this was undoubtedly the worst result. Ning Qianqing and Li Beitian had both broken through to the fire-flaming realm. They were definitely Li Tianlan's 2 greatest helpers. If the 2 of them kept winning, they would undoubtedly help Li Tianlan get the first place. But now, Li Beitian and Ning Qianqing met each other in the first round. It was destined that only one of them could survive. For the East Emperor Palace, this was definitely a loss. After all, this was not a regular maneuver. There was no such thing as a winner's group or a loser's group. They had to make a ranking according to their strength. This was an actual combat class. A win was a win, a loss was a loss. There were 50 people in the first round, and there were 25 actual combat matches. No matter if Ning Qianqing or Li Beitian lost, their ranking would fall below the 25th place. Both of them were definitely among the top of the 50 people, and the ranking after the 25th place was definitely not a reflection of their true strength. However, that was the rule. If they were unlucky, in an ordinary actual combat lesson, no one could complain. But from the perspective of actual combat, it was not a bad thing for the 2 to meet. As Li Tianlan said, they could get to know each other better. In the ranking of the top 10 experts of the young generation, Li Beitian ranked 4th and Ning Qianqing ranked 5th. Both of them had recently broken through to the fire-flaming realm at the same time. Although they were friends, it did not mean that they did not want to spar with each other. Although today was not a good opportunity, since it had appeared, it would not be good to miss it. Go! Li Tianlan glanced at them and said with a smile, don't overdo it. We're on the same side. Don't get angry. Number 3. Number 5. In front of the crowd, Yang Mengjiang's voice had already risen quite a bit. What are you waiting for? Come up. Ning Qianqing glanced at Li Beitian. The 2 of them stepped out of the line and walked up to platform number 2. The others were stunned for a moment, and then there was an uproar. Some were excited, some were gloating, and some were looking forward to it. No one expected that the two numbers Yang Mengjiang randomly called out were Li Beitian and Ning Qianqing. Li Beitian was high profile. He hid the name Li Taishu not to hide his identity, but because he really felt that the name was not worthy of his wisdom and martial prowess. In the past few days, Li Beitian had been wandering around. It was said that he had experienced the tenderness of no less than 10 female classmates. Now that he was the great void swordmaster of Mount Shu, there were very few female students who did not spread their legs. In the past few days, he had been visiting the female dormitories alone. In this way, he lived a comfortable life, but his identity had long been spread throughout the Sky Academy, and almost everyone knew him. On the other hand, Ning Qianqing was on the list of the top 10 experts of the younger generation and was even more famous. During the entrance maneuver, their relationship of mutual support was also known to everyone. Now that the two of them had met, it was simply lively from every angle. Even Yang Mengjiang did not expect that the two numbers he randomly called out would call out to them. He was obviously stunned and could not help but look in Li Tianlan's direction. Li Tianlan was also looking at him, his expression calm and indifferent. Yang Mengjiang's expression did not change. He turned around and said directly, "Come up. Just let them fight each other. Teacher Yang's nickname is really beautiful. Yulan, who do you think is stronger?" In the crowd, Su Yunzong, who was extremely eye-catching in both height and body shape, tilted his neck and looked at Li Beitian and Ning Qianqing on the platform. He laughed grimly in a low voice. "Don't talk nonsense." Gu Yulan glanced at Su Yunzong. She once again put on a delicate mask that covered her expression. Although her eyes were stern, her voice sounded unusually coquettish and tender, which made people's bones go soft. If it were before, Li Beitian would definitely be stronger. But now that Ning Qianqing has probably succeeded in breaking through, it's hard to say who is stronger. She paused and said calmly, "Dongyu, what do you think?" Lu Dongyu stood beside them silently and shook her head. Among the former 3 giants of the Flames of War, Lu Dongchao died in the hands of Li Tianlan, and Tan Shilai died in the hands of Ning Qianqing. Now the Flames of War was in pieces, and Lu Dongyu had long lost her former glory. She followed Gu Yulan and Su Yunzong like an inconspicuous follower. Hearing Gu Yulan's question, Lu Dongyu shook her head silently and resisted the desire to look back. She said calmly, "It's better if they both die when they fight." Gu Yulan was silent. Looking at Ning Qianqing and Li Beitian who had already walked onto the platform, she squinted her bright eyes and said calmly, "Watch this battle carefully. I've received news that Li Tianlan has also joined Huading's Special Operations Bureau, but not the headquarters, but the Thunder. I have an intuition that he will be our strongest opponent in the future. Now the opportunity to understand our opponent is right in front of us. We can't miss it. How unlucky are these two to meet each other? I guess they're already crying in their hearts." On the other side of the square formation, a short and fat man squinted his small eyes and chuckled. The meaning in his smile was hard to understand. His laugh was obscene and extremely inconspicuous. However, with him at the center, except for a few of his trusted followers, the others around him seemed to intentionally or unintentionally stay away from him. No one dared to approach him. He was Fan Haoyu, the leader of the elite organization. He was one of the older students. After the fall of the Flames of War, among the senior students who stayed in school, the elite organization could be said to be the most powerful one. Recently, several backbones of the Flames of War were introduced to the elite organization, which further increased its power. Different from Lu Dongchao and Lu Dongyu in the last session, Fan Haoyu looked extremely terrifying when they joined forces. Fan Haoyu looked fat and short, but his strength at the peak of the fire-flaming realm, which was close to the fulfillment, was outstanding among all the students and even crushed many teachers. Among the 50 people present, basically all of them had suffered losses from the elite organization in the entrance maneuver. They had more or less seen Fan Haoyu's strength, so naturally, no one was willing to provoke him. "Don't jinx it. That voice is a bit weird. Don't call us together. If that happens, we won't be able to cry even if we want to." Beside Fan Haoyu, a handsome young man who looked the complete opposite to him said helplessly. He was Su Mai, the second in command of the elite organization. He was Fan Haoyu's best friend since childhood, so he had no scruples when speaking. You're the one with AF asterisk King Crow's beak, aren't you? I'll torture you to death. Fan Haoyu looked at Su Mai and suddenly smiled. In this battle, who do you want to meet the most? Who do you want to meet the most? Su Mai was stunned and suddenly fell silent. Gu Yulan. After a full half a minute, he spoke softly. There was no anger in his voice, but his fighting spirit was extremely strong. In the entrance maneuver, the elite organization was responsible for the hunting mission in the woods. At that time, he was successfully attacked by Gu Yulan, who seemed to have no combat power. At that time, they all thought that Gu Yulan was in the ice-condensing realm, but now all kinds of information showed that Gu Yulan was a genius who had just entered the fire-flaming realm. But at that time, she used the means of the ice-condensing realm to attack him, which was a great shame. Now, Su Mai wanted to meet Gu Yulan most to avenge his shame. Fan Haoyu frowned and hesitated. In fact, he wanted to persuade Su Mai now. Although he was humiliated by Gu Yulan once, her strength was there. If they fought head-on, Su Mai might not be a match for Gu Yulan, since their realms were similar. But it was not easy to say such words, even if they were brothers. Who do you want to meet the most? Su Mai took a deep breath and suddenly asked. I want to learn from the little princess's sweetheart. Recently, there have been more and more rumors about the little princess in Yuzhou. Many people know that our little princess has already fallen in love with a freshman of the Sky Academy. Hey, some childs can't wait to tear him apart. Since I'm in a favorable position, I'd like to see this brother's ability in advance. If he can go against the natural order, it's not bad for me to be his follower. If he can't, I can do him a favor in advance, so that I won't know how I die. Fan Haoyu laughed and subconsciously looked back in Li Tianlan's direction. In his sight, Li Tianlan almost immediately turned back to look at him. The two were stunned at the same time, but at least they were familiar with each other. After smiling and nodding, they did not say anything. If we meet the little princess? Su Mai hesitated for a moment and suddenly said. Fan Haoyu's face froze and he said bitterly, Su Mai, don't jinx it. Be careful, or I'll strangle you. Su Mai was unmoved and continued. If we meet the little princess, what should we do if she asks us to admit defeat? There were countless experts in the Sky Academy. But Wang Yuetong was obviously the last one they wanted to meet. It had nothing to do with strength. They could not fight at all. What else do you want to do? Fan Haoyu gritted his teeth and said, What else can we do except admit defeat? The sound of metal clashing rang out, crisp and sweet. In front of Fan Haoyu, an elegant woman with long hair silently took out two exquisite double knives and was gently wiping them. The woman had a plump figure. Her buttocks and legs wrapped in camouflage pants were round and slender, with soft curves and extremely attractive. This was a woman who could be described as amorous just by looking at her back, soft and charming. Her white and tender hand gently held the hilt of the knife. The blade was bright, but the curve at the bend was not smooth. Instead, it was full of sharp edges and corners, looking sharp and hard like joints. Short knife and beauty. Sharp and charming. Natural and complemented each other. Fan Haoyu's eyes lit up slightly. Looking at this woman, who was quite legendary and tragic among the senior students of the last year, he suddenly missed her charming and affectionate body. Hey Du Hanin. Fan Haoyu took a step forward and said with a smile, How about coming to my dormitory tonight? As long as you're obedient, I'll cover your food and drink for a month. Several freshmen nearby subconsciously turned their heads to look at the woman holding the double knives with fiery eyes. Does such a beautiful senior sister do that kind of business? Although it's a little expensive to cover a month's food and drink, it's worth it. Du Hanin silently wiped the knife in her hand and turned a blind eye to the strange eyes around her. She just shook her head gently and said softly, I'm not going. On the high platform, the sword intent suddenly rose. Illusory, the sword energy burned the prairie. Everyone raised their heads at the same time and looked at the battlefield. The frost-like chill spread rapidly. Neither Li Beitian nor Ning Qianqing said a word and directly made their moves. Countless small and delicate ice swords lined up around Ning Qianqing like a sword formation, rising and falling with amazing momentum. The high platform was about 20 meters in circumference. Wherever the sword formation pointed, Li Beitian seemed to be walking in the void. The illusory sword intent surrounded him, making his whole body blurry. His body was still in everyone's sight, But every step he took gave people a feeling that he was flickering. It was impossible to lock on or even attack him. He kept moving forward. The distance between the two was getting closer and closer. The sword formation around Ning Qianqing was getting more and more magnificent, and the sword intent was dense. The two were 10 meters apart. Ning Qianqing took a step forward. The entire sword formation rumbled in an instant. Countless ice swords rushed toward Li Beitian without reservation. Li Beitian slowed down a little, but he did not stop. Around him, the illusory sword intent became more and more ethereal. A large amount of sword rain approached him but suddenly disappeared, leaving only the cold sword intent that kept spreading, which made most people frightened. Li Beitian still moved forward. Ning Qianqing's sword rain was constantly cut up by the invisible great void sword intent in front of him, as if being swallowed by the void. His pace became slower and slower, but his momentum kept rising. 3 meters. Li Beitian raised one hand. In an instant, a bright sword light formed in his hand. It was sharp, fleeting and distant. The great void sword intent enveloped the whole place. Everyone present almost instinctively straightened their bodies and became alert. The corner of Li Beitian's mouth twitched. "You go down, I'll go up." Ning Qianqing looked deeply at him, nodded, and jumped off the high platform. "I admit defeat." The whole place was silent. The students who were waiting for the fight between the two were all dumbfounded. What happened just now? How could the winner be decided so quickly? Everyone looked at Li Beitian, and then at Ning Qianqing. This was AF*** King fixed match. He was AF*** King actor. Chapter 112. Although all the people present were geniuses, not many could understand the battle at once. The sword intent fell as soon as it rose. How could this be called wanting more? The drama ended as soon as it began. It was like watching an East Island love action movie, which was called a blockbuster. The gentle and charming heroine had just appeared, but it was over before she could make her pose. Everyone felt suffocated and had nowhere to vent their anger, which made them feel very aggrieved. Ning Qianqing did not care. After jumping off the platform, he just looked at Yang Mengjiang and waited for his decision. 1 credit is deducted. Yang Mengjiang said expressionlessly. Then he waved his hand and said, "Get in line." Li Tianlan subconsciously narrowed his eyes. Li Beitian, who had not come down from the platform, Fan Haoyu in the crowd, Du Hanin, who was holding 2 sabers, and Gu Yulan, who had remained calm, all changed their expressions slightly. But no one said anything. The battle between Li Beitian and Ning Qianqing could be seen clearly by those who had a good eye. Although the process was not intense, the outcome was not exaggerated. The two did not fight based on their combat strength, but on their sword intent. The Great Void sword intent was illusory, while the Prairie Fire sword intent was awe-inspiring and complete. In such a battle, although neither of them used their strongest means, many substantial things were exposed. Moreover, they did not hurt each other's feelings. This was a real fight. They were calm but each had their own style. This battle was short, and the process was slow, but the quality of the battle was self-evident. How could Yang Mengjiang, as the leader of the actual combat lessons teaching group, not understand it? But he still deducted 1 credit from Ning Qianqing. This kind of targeting attitude was a little obvious. Li Tianlan smiled and took a deep look at Yang Mengjiang. This core figure of Kunlun City, he didn't seem to be as straightforward as his appearance. Deep down, his stance was quite firm. Ning Qianqing and Li Beitian stepped down one after another and got in line again. This point is unjustly lost. Yang Mengjiang is not a good person. Li Beitian took a deep breath. He opened his mouth and said with an ugly expression, "It's okay. Didn't I add the point I lost to you? There's nothing unjust about it." Li Tianlan didn't say anything. He just looked at Yang Mengjiang in silence. Yang Mengjiang's eyes seemed to be looking at him as well. His eyes were gloomy and indifferent, but Li Tianlan could always see a trace of sinister and deliberate provocation in his eyes. Li Tianlan smiled, and his eyes grew gentler. Yang Mengjiang's gaze had already shifted to the side as he continued. "Number 6, number 17, come on stage." Li Tianlan and Ning Qianqing, however, in the next 3 years, there would be 2 actual combat classes every month. He had plenty of time to torture these freshmen. As the core figure of Kunlun City, There was no pure right or wrong in Yang Mingjiang's heart. Since this matter was personally ordered by Director Gu, he did the right thing if he did it well. Beside Li Tianlan, Wang Yuetong let out a soft cry of surprise. She waved the note in her hand and said with a smile, "I'm number 17. Who's number 6? In the crowd, the crisp sound of metal clashing rang out. A figure holding a pair of sabers passed through the crowd and silently walked up the high platform. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes. This person. Ning Qianqing also frowned slightly. This woman is not weak, and I feel that her state is a little strange. Yuetong. Be careful later. The corner of Li Baitian's mouth twitched, and he looked depressed. In the entrance maneuver, Li Baitian was seriously injured by a sneak attack not long after he got out of the maze and entered the woods. At that time, several senior students were led by Du Hanin. This person's realm was not high, but she was extremely fast and flexible. Every move of hers was an assassin's method that broke out instantly and then retreated unscathed. Moreover, she had rich combat experience and knew when to advance and when to retreat. Although it was just a sneak attack in the entrance maneuver, Li Tianlan was deeply impressed by this woman who had seriously injured him. This was supposed to be a feud, but it was stopped by the enchantress. The enchantress said that Du Hanin was her student. Li Tianlan didn't know how much of the enchantress's teaching she had learned. The enchantress's student should not be in danger when fighting against Wang Yuetong, right? I know. Wang Yuetong responded crisply. She looked at Li Tianlan and said softly, "I'm going up." Li Tianlan nodded and looked at Du Hanin, who was already standing on the high platform, without saying anything. He had read the information about the Sky Academy that Qin Weibai had collected for him. According to Li Baitian, Du Hanin's strength was definitely not weak, but this name did not appear on the list that Qin Weibai had compiled. If she was a freshman, Li Tianlan would regard her as a fish that had slipped through the net. But she was clearly a senior student, which was a little strange. Wang Yuetong had already walked through the crowd and onto the high platform. Du Hanin's eyes were soft. She pursed her lips and smiled, saying softly, "Greetings, little princess." Her appearance was undoubtedly extremely beautiful. It was not an aggressive kind of beauty, but a very gentle and comfortable feeling. However, as she smiled, her entire body seemed to have a touch of worldly charm. She was charming and affectionate, and would not make people feel disgusted. Instead, she had a kind of grace and dignity that made people's hearts tremble. "Are you a student of Sixth Sister?" Wang Yuetong tilted her little head and said with a smile, "Then just admit defeat. I won't embarrass you. I won't care about the little misunderstanding in the entrance maneuver. How about that?" The two stood opposite each other. Although they were both wearing camouflage uniforms, they looked like a beautiful landscape painting. One was mature and charming, while the other was young and enchanting. It was supposed to be an actual combat lesson, but at this moment, it looked very pleasing to the eye. "Sorry." Du Hanin's voice was still soft, but she said very firmly, "I want to win." "Cut the crap. Is this a place for you to waste time? Do it, don't let me drag you down." Below the high platform, Yang Mingjiang's rough voice rang out in a high-pitched tone. "If you don't do it, each of you will be deducted 1 credit. In every class of the Sky Academy, the teacher had the power to deduct 5 credits and reward 3 credits. But this power was limited to 1 time. It was also to better restrain and motivate the students in the class. Therefore, in the class, deducting credits and rewarding credits could be said to be the most exciting things. "Excuse me." Du Hanin bent down slightly. When she straightened up, she also raised her hand. A sharp and delicate dagger with curved edges like a bone shot directly at Wang Yuetong. A fine, almost undetectable silk thread was connected to her wrist. When the dagger was shot out, the silk thread was straightened. Du Hanin's whole body seemed to be driven by the dagger and rushed directly to Wang Yuetong. The second dagger was thrown into the air as she sprinted. It rose in a straight line and fell to the ground with a whistling sound. The strong qi whistled in the air. The dagger broke through the air, and the whole blade was covered with a layer of ice. The dagger light shone brightly in the ice. Du Hanin's long hair fluttered, with determination and sharpness, decisive and ruthless. An ice wall had been set up in front of Wang Yuetong. The surging sword intent condensed behind the ice wall, like waves. The dagger stabbed into the ice wall with ice. Du Hanin, who followed closely behind, held the hilt of the dagger at the same time. Spin! On the bright blade, the saber gang suddenly rose. A 1-meter-long saber gang twisted and extended. As Du Hanyin turned around, the sharp light streaked across the ice wall. Boom! The ice wall suddenly shattered. Ice chips flew all over the sky and instantly condensed into swords. The surging sword intent was dense, whistling and about to envelop Du Hanyin's whole body. The rain of swords rained down. Du Hanyin held the dagger in one hand and shook the other slightly. The second dagger that was about to fall to the ground shook slightly, and then her whole body had returned to where the dagger was. The whistling rain of swords fell on the high platform. Under the impact of the sword chi, the hard ground was instantly filled with countless holes. Du Hanyin, who had already appeared in the same place, dodged the rain of swords and rushed to Wang Yuetong again. Natural wind vein? Under the platform, Li Beitian looked at Du Hanyin's figure seriously and said with some uncertainty. Li Tianlan also seemed to be a little hesitant. Watching the battle with rapt attention, he shook his head hesitantly and said, "It doesn't look like it." He had the wind and thunder veins, so he was most sensitive to strength and speed. People born with the wind vein had amazing speed. Experts who had been trained might be able to achieve the same effect in speed as those with the wind vein, but they would never be able to lift heavy things as easily as floating clouds and flowing water. Therefore, people with the wind vein were born assassins. Du Hanyin was extremely fast and skillful with the two daggers, but Li Tianlan always felt that her movements were a little stiff. She seemed to be born with the wind vein, but he always felt that something was missing. On the high platform, Wang Yuetong missed the first strike, so she raised her sword again. The whistling sword energy scattered on the high platform gathered again. On the high platform, a 5-meter-long heavy sword stood in the air. Wang Yuetong waved her hand slightly. The huge sword shook hard in the air and fell instantly. It was a unique skill of the Wang family of Beihai. The sword was balanced. Everything was balanced and everywhere. Countless sword intent spread in an instant and enveloped the whole high platform. Du Hanyin, who was sprinting, suddenly had a trace of frost all over her body. Wang Yuetong moved her body. In her small white hand, a delicate and slender ice sword appeared. In the surging sword intent, Wang Yuetong's body instantly turned into a flowing light and rushed straight to Du Hanyin. It was also the unique skill of the Wang family of Beihai. Sword listens to the wind. At this moment, Wang Yuetong's long hair was dancing, stunning and proud. She was as graceful as snow and her sword intent was like a rainbow. Raindrops fell from the air. Wang Yuetong went all out and used another unique skill. Sword listens to the rain. The sword rain fell, sharp and dazzling. The sharpness shone in all directions. The distance of more than 10 meters was closed in an instant. Du Hanyin, who was holding two sabers, stretched her body and faced the rain, the sword in the sky, and Wang Yuetong without flinching. She took a step forward. The moment Wang Yuetong's long sword arrived, she held the sabers with both hands and suddenly spun. Like a sword dance. Like a flower blooming. Cold. And elegant. In the air, countless pieces of ice flew around her in all directions. She spun faster and faster, and the ice became sharper and sharper. The sword rain in the sky shattered in the ice light, and the ice sword in Wang Yuetong's hand disappeared inch by inch. Du Hanyin was still spinning. The giant sword fell from the sky. Du Hanyin, who was spinning, suddenly pushed Wang Yuetong's chest and threw out a dagger. Wang Yuetong's body was directly pushed out by her, and Du Hanyin rushed to the other side with the dagger. The giant sword fell. There was a loud bang. The powerful impact shook the whole high platform. With the place where the two of them fought as the center, a visible airwave appeared on the whole platform. Both Du Hanyin and Wang Yuetong were hit by the airwave and fell off the platform at the same time. There was a moment of silence on the scene. The next second, thunderous applause suddenly broke out. Good. Everyone cheered loudly. Although this battle was also short, the process was much more exciting than the battle between Ning Qianqing and Li Beitian. The cold and elegant Du Hanyin, the proud and majestic Wang Yuetong, the agile figure, and the unparalleled unique skills were the real meaning of the actual combat lesson. Yang Mengjiang looked at the two of them coldly. After a moment of silence he said coldly, "As a senior student, you actually tied with a freshman. What a shame. Deduct 1 credit." The corner of Du Hanyin's mouth moved. She wanted to say that she could fight again, But in the actual combat lesson, falling off the platform was equal to failure. Such a rule was not something she could break. So she just nodded silently in the end and said nothing. Your body is stiff and your reaction is not fast enough. Even if you can't dodge the sword just now, you shouldn't have fallen off the platform. She has already made a move in advance. If you had been prepared, you would have won the battle. Yang Mengjiang took a deep breath and continued. In every battle, it was his responsibility as a teacher to point out the students' own shortcomings. Du Hanyin continued to nod. Seeing that Yang Mengjiang had turned to face Wang Yuetong, she gave a self-deprecating smile and walked back to the line. Vaguely, she was still calm, but she gave people a feeling of helplessness and loneliness. Yuetong is good. You just lack actual combat experience in this battle. You need to train more in the future. Yang Mengjiang looked at Wang Yuetong and his tone seemed to soften. Wang Yuetong nodded and also returned to the line. Before Li Tianlan could speak, Yang Mengjiang said again, Number 10. Number 50. Get on the platform. Battles broke out and ended on the platform one after another. Compared to the previous two matches, the following matches were much more bloody. Someone even had an arm broken in the battle, and in the end, he staggered off the high platform. Yang Mengjiang was expressionless all the way. Watching another battle that could be said to be a lose-lose, he continued to call, Number 15, Number 26. Li Tianlan was slightly stunned. Looking at the number in his hand, he smiled and directly stepped out of the line. Yang Mengjiang's eyes turned cold, but he remained calm. A moment later, a young man standing next to Gu Yulan also stepped onto the platform. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and glanced at Gu Yulan, his eyes cold. Do it. Hurry up. Yang Mengjiang's roar continued. Go to hell. Opposite Li Tianlan, the young man's figure rushed over in an instant. Without saying a word, he attacked with all his strength. He was an expert in the stabilization phase of the ice-condensing realm of the former flames of war. With such strength, he did not expect to defeat Li Tianlan, who possessed the wind and thunder veins. But just now, Gu Yulan had told him that he should attack with all his strength, forcibly consume Li Tianlan's physical strength, and not let him rank too high. Attack with all his strength. He carried out the order very seriously. As he took the first step, all his strength had been completely concentrated in one blow. A war of attrition. A head-on confrontation. Li Tianlan's expression did not change. Looking at his opponent who was madly roaring and rushing toward him, he suddenly raised his hand when the opponent rushed directly to him. In front of him, the air suddenly twisted, and the sound whistled high. A punch against a punch. In the cracking sound of bones, the young man, who had attacked with all his strength, was directly blown away more than 20 meters by the punch. He fell awkwardly under the platform, motionless. Li Tianlan glanced at Gu Yulan, who narrowed her eyes and smiled, but his eyes were full of viciousness. There was no applause or cheering under the platform, but only silence. Killing an expert in the stabilization phase of the ice-condensing realm with one punch. The ice-condensing realm was the realm that most of the freshmen had reached. Since Li Tianlan could kill his opponent with one punch, didn't it mean that he could also kill most of them with one punch? Suddenly, countless fearful eyes under the platform looked at Li Tianlan. Looking calm, Li Tianlan slowly walked down the platform step by step. He came to Yang Mengjiang and said calmly, Teacher, please give me some advice. Yang Mengjiang slightly narrowed his eyes and did not speak for a moment. Li Tianlan waited in silence, neither arrogant nor rash. Yang Mengjiang suddenly smiled and whispered, Do you think I can't beat you? Li Tianlan slightly raised his eyebrows and said lightly, I don't know what you're talking about, teacher. You don't need to know. Yang Mengjiang sneered, You just need to remember one thing. In the next 3 years, you won't have an easy time in my actual combat lesson. Without warning, Yang Mengjiang suddenly raised his leg and kicked Li Tianlan hard in the chest. Even if it was not a full blow from a thunder-shocking realm expert, it instantly made Li Tianlan's body fly backward, and blood gushed out of his mouth. You're cruel and merciless, and you don't care about your classmates. 5 credits will be deducted. Chapter 113. The 5th round of the actual combat lesson. When the winner stepped on the loser's chest and made the loser vomit blood, Yang Mengjiang did not say that the opponent was cruel and merciless. The seventh round of the actual combat lesson. When the winner twisted the loser's arm and kicked him off the platform, Yang Mengjiang did not say that the opponent was cruel and merciless. The ninth round of the actual combat lesson. When the winner kicked the loser out of the field, causing the loser to faint on the spot, Yang Mengjiang also did not say that the opponent was cruel and merciless. The 12th round of the actual combat lesson. The freshman Li Tianlan versus the senior Mo Han. There was no humiliation or delay. When Li Tianlan beat the senior Mo Han out of the field with one punch, Yang Mengjiang unexpectedly attacked Li Tianlan. A thunderous strike. Not only did he seriously injure Li Tianlan in an instant, but he was also cruel and merciless. He put the hat of not caring about his classmates and deducted 5 credits from him at the same time. Strange red blood spurted from Li Tianlan's mouth. Yang Mengjiang's kick was not a full force, but it was really powerful. When Yang Mengjiang lifted his foot, Li Tianlan didn't even have time to react before he was kicked into the air. His body hit the 2 students in the front row hard, and the whole phalanx was suddenly in chaos. Yang Mengjiang's smile was cold and playful. His kick on a person in the chi-controlling realm could not heal his injury without a month or 2, unless he used credits to exchange for some precious recovery potions, so that the time could be shortened. But in any case, no matter how terrifying Li Tianlan's potential was, some advantages would gradually shrink when he was injured. The actual combat lesson was held once every half a month, and he would be deducted 5 credits at one time. If he found a chance to kick him again, he would fall out of the class after 2 or 3 times at most. A student in an ordinary class could be killed easily by taking the opportunity of a maneuver. What was the big deal? Against Kunlun City, did you really think that Zhuang Huayang, an old headmaster who was about to retire, could save you? What a reckless thing. Bang! Li Tianlan's body finally fell to the ground. He closed his mouth tightly and swallowed his blood. For a while, he could not even say a word. Senior brother! Wang Yuetong screamed. She squeezed through the crowd in front of her and rushed over. She subconsciously searched her body with one small hand. But the potion she carried had already been given to Li Tianlan a few days ago, and Li Tianlan fed it to Ning Qianqing. Now she had no potion on her. Li Tianlan held Wang Yuetong's palm. There seemed to be a lot of blood flowing fiercely between his chest and abdomen, and finally gushed up along his throat. The feeling was spicy and hot. In an instant, she went from the peak of the ice-condensing realm to the fire-flaming realm, the prying realm, the stabilization realm, and directly to the peak. In the dark world, there were a few drugs that could forcibly improve one's realm in the face of danger. Because Li Tianlan had entered the thunder-shocking realm before, he could barely improve to the realm that he had reached before. But in the entire dark world, only the Wang family of Beihai had unique skills that could temporarily improve one's realm. For hundreds of years, this top wealthy family, which focused on extreme outbursts of unique skills, had been crazy about improving combat effectiveness. One of their unique skills was almost universal in the 4 realms of martial arts, from the chi-controlling realm to the thunder-shocking realm. It could improve one's strength by a whole realm. Although it could not break the threshold of the invincible realm, it was terrifying enough. This unique skill was the same as Li Tianlan's forcible improvement of realm. It burned potential, and if used too often, it would affect the foundation. But at this moment, Wang Yuetong, who was extremely angry, did not hesitate to use it. The unique skill of the Wang family of Beihai, against the way of heaven. Go to hell! 2 flames appeared on both sides of Wang Yuetong. There was wind. The 2 flames rose instantly. An unprecedented cold-killing intent kept blooming on Wang Yuetong. She suddenly screamed, and her clear voice echoed in the whole No. 1 training ground in an instant. It was like the first cry of a phoenix, immature but still majestic. The 2 flames suddenly soared with the wind and rushed to Yang Mengjiang without reservation. A giant sword more than 10 meters long roared and condensed. The sword body was surrounded by flames, and it fell straight from the air dozens of meters high. The sword listens to the wind. The sword balances. The sword surges. The sword watches the fire. In an instant, Wang Yuetong raised all her combat effectiveness to the extreme. She released all her unique skills at the same time and threw them at Yang Mengjiang. The flames, the wind, and the giant sword gathered together in an instant. Wang Yuetong's body was full of strange phenomena, and there was a vague sense of sacredness and inviolability. A sharp and scorching aura seemed to bloom from nothingness. Wang Yuetong was not the only one who rushed to Yang Mengjiang. Li Beitian seemed to turn into a sword in an instant. Large flames flickered around him, appearing and disappearing from time to time. Li Beitian's sword intent was unprecedentedly condensed. He also attacked with all his strength without any reservation. At this moment, Li Beitian was the sword, and the sword was Li Beitian. He and the sword became one. His body passed through the large light and shadow created by Wang Yuetong. He raised one hand, and a dazzling sword light burst out instantly. It seemed to split the void, invisible and dangerous. The second style of Great Void Sword, unification of all swords. Ning Qianqing was almost neck to neck with Li Beitian. They rushed into the light curtain at the same time. Li Beitian's sword was extremely heavy, but Ning Qianqing's sword was extremely fast, like a beam of rainbow light. The flames in his hand rose, but they were still as cold as ice. The ice and fire formed a sword. In the blink of an eye, waves of sword qi roared and shot at Yang Mengjiang. Wang Yuetong attacked first, but it was Ning Qianqing who attacked Yang Mengjiang first. One of the 7 swords of Jade Pool. Aurora Glimpse Sword. Yu Qingyan's figure was 2 seconds slower. She, who had not really reached the peak of the ice-condensing realm, was undoubtedly the least noticeable, and her performance seemed to be very poor in actual combat experience. She staggered into the battle, stumbling. It seemed that she was more of a hindrance than a help. But in a place where no one noticed, one of Yu Qingyan's fingers had turned into a dazzling blood red. A drop of blood flowed from her fingertip and instantly seeped into her nail. Yi Huayu did not hesitate either. A long sword condensed from ice appeared behind her. She reached out to draw the sword. The sword suddenly rang out and went straight into the sky. In the crowd, Fan Haoyu had no time to hesitate. His fat body instantly knocked through the crowd in front of him. He clenched one hand into a fist. With a burst of dense cracking of joints, Fan Haoyu roared and punched Yang Mengjiang with a large piece of bright fire. A delicate short saber flew into the battlefield, followed by Du Hanin. The saber light was dazzling in the large light and shadow, spinning wildly. Wang Yuetong broke out the limit of the peak of the fire-flaming realm, and Fan Haoyu. 2 were at the peak of the fire-flaming realm. Li Beitian and Ning Qianqing were both at the fire-flaming realm, and 3 were at the ice-condensing realm. 7 people, almost at the same time, attacked with all their strength and determination to kill. Yang Mengjiang, who was still waiting for Li Tianlan's reaction, changed his expression dramatically. He did not expect that by injuring Li Tianlan, he would poke such a big hornet's nest. Before Li Tianlan could fight back, so many people had jumped out to kill him. In a hurry, Yang Mengjiang only had time to set up a large piece of lightning in front of him. The giant sword in the air, surrounded by flames, crashed to the ground. Lightning, raging fire, sword intent, and ice light, everything intertwined and exploded in an instant. Large pieces of sparks and broken ice spread endlessly in the violent shock waves. Li Tianlan, who had just caught his breath, had no time to think. He got up and was about to rush to the battlefield. A strong arm suddenly grabbed Li Tianlan's arm. Li Tianlan suddenly looked back. In his sight, a handsome young man chuckled and said, "It's okay. Yang Mengjiang doesn't dare to kill them. But if you go up now, it's hard to say." He paused and continued with a smile, "I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Sumai." The light in the field finally dissipated. The violent shock waves swept through the crowd. Except for a few experts at the peak of the fire-flaming realm and the ice-condensing realm, everyone fell to the ground in disorder, struggling to get up. Whether standing or lying down, everyone's eyes were filled with a kind of extremely obvious complexity and fear, which was difficult to understand. In recent years, it seemed to be the first time that a student took the initiative to besiege a teacher in the Sky Academy. It was unimaginable how far-reaching the impact of this incident was. What happened today might become a legend for a long time. Everyone looked at Li Tianlan in a daze. Although Li Tianlan did not participate in this siege, it started because of him. Did this freshman, who was only in the qi-controlling realm, really have some magic? Li Tianlan wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and stared at the battlefield. After an extreme outburst, Wang Yuetong's aura was fluctuating violently. She seemed to be at the peak of the ice-condensing realm or the peak of the fire-flaming realm. Her state looked extremely unstable. Li Beitian and Ning Qianqing, on the other hand, had consumed too much energy. Their bodies, which used to be straight, were gradually hunched. Fan Haoyu, Du Hanin, and Yi Huayu all looked fine. Only Yu Qingyin's face was even paler than Wang Yuetong's. Her body trembled uncontrollably. She did not look like she was injured, but rather frightened. Yang Mengjiang, who was surrounded by everyone, was in a more difficult situation than anyone else. His camouflage uniform was almost completely torn, and a large part of his hair was burnt. Dark red blood flowed out of his mouth, and he coughed out large mouthfuls of blood. After a while, he barely managed to stand up. I'll tell my father what happened here right away. I'd like to know whether the Sky Academy is the Special Warfare Academy of Jianghu State or the backyard of Kunlun City. I also want to know who gave you the courage to be so lawless and unscrupulous to target a freshman. Wang Yuetong's cold and indifferent voice sounded. Her tone was firm and cold. Mount Shu also has the same question. Li Beitian sneered and said, the Sky Academy is in a foul atmosphere. A stupid deputy director came out of the entrance maneuver and attacked a freshman. In the first class, you, a teacher leader of the actual combat course, also targeted a freshman. Everything is F*King done by Kunlun City. It's disgusting. Mount Shu would like to ask whether Gu Xingyun of Kunlun City is the god of war of Jianghu State who protects Jianghu State or the local emperor who acts like a tyrant in Jianghu State. Dongqing Clan and Jade Pool also have the same question. Kunlun City had better come up with a reasonable explanation in the high-level meeting. Not only Kunlun City, but also the Sky Academy should give us an explanation. If there's no explanation, I don't want to study in such an academy. I'd like to see how you, Yang Mengjiang, will behave after you deliberately suppress the freshmen because of your standpoint and Gu Yunxia's reputation of siding with the same party and eliminating the dissident spreads throughout Jianghu State. I'll tell my family everything that happened today and then report it to the army headquarters. I can testify to everything that happened today on any occasion and guarantee the authenticity of every word I said. Fan Haoyu said with a poker face. You. Yang Mengjiang spat out a mouthful of blood again. He stared at the group of freshmen in front of him and gnashed his teeth. You owe my man an apology. Wang Yuetong said coldly. Now, you must give it back to him. Wang Yuetong, who called herself his woman for the first time, felt more and more proud in her heart, but she also felt a little distressed. Yang Mengjiang gritted his teeth and sneered. What if I refuse? Then I'll kill you. A low and hoarse voice suddenly sounded. Yang Mengjiang's expression changed. Before he could speak, a black shadow appeared directly in front of him. The shadow raised its arm, and the air around its arm slightly vibrated. 100 meters away, the figure of tribulation appeared beside Zhuang Huayang. He crossed his hands slightly in front of his chest. With a click, 2 arm knives popped out of his sleeves, shining with cold light. At the same time, the shadow in front of Yang Mengjiang also stretched out 2 arm knives that were completely condensed from air. Since when does Sai City like to meddle in other people's business? If he doesn't apologize, I'll kill him. He forced the little princess of the Wang family of Beihai to burn her potential. I'd like to see if Gu Xingyun dares to ask for an explanation from His Majesty after I kill him. The enchantress's husky and sexy voice was full of coldness, and every word was as sharp as a blade. Wang Yuetong breathed a sigh of relief. Her extremely strong but rather unstable state fluctuated violently and quickly fell. Her face was still pale. She slowly walked to Li Tianlan and held his hand. Yang Mengjiang, who had just looked down upon the freshman, froze in place. His face turned red, but he did not speak. Everyone's body slightly relaxed. Only Yu Qingyin's body was still trembling slightly. Ning Qianqing looked distressed. He subconsciously walked over and whispered, Qingyin, it's okay. Since you've chosen the Sky Academy, you'll encounter these things in the future. Are you afraid of blood? Yu Qingyin's face was pale, and she shook her head slightly. In fact, she was not particularly afraid of the swords and sabers in the dark world. It was just her first experience that made her feel that everything was different from what she had imagined. What no one knew was that just today, just now, she killed someone. This was the first time in her life that she had killed someone. Zhuang Huayang had already walked to the bottom of the platform with a group of high-level school officials. Tribulation. Gu Yunxia. The Enchantress. Yi Fengqing. Jianghu. A group of high-level school officials surrounded Zhuang Huayang, waiting for his attitude. Zhuang Huayang smiled softly and said calmly, "This term Sky Academy is indeed a bit foul." Beside him, Gu Yunxia's face changed slightly, but she did not speak. This term Sky Academy was filled with too many games and power tricks when arranging the list of high-level school officials. Zhuang Huayang's words obviously meant something. However, Zhuang Huayang did not say much. As if he had said it casually, he directly set his eyes on Yang Mengjiang. "I don't want to know the process for the time being." Zhuang Huayang said indifferently, "Obviously, you've incurred public anger. That's wrong, so you should apologize." "Headmaster, Li Tianlan is cruel and merciless. Yang Mengjiang opened his mouth subconsciously. "Teacher Yang." Gu Yunxia winked at him and said calmly, "What you did today was indeed inappropriate. You should apologize." Yang Mengjiang's body stiffened where he was. He looked at Tribulation, whose eyes were sharp and piercingly cold, and then at the Enchantress, who was full of hidden killing intent. He did not speak for a long time. "I'll count to 3. If you don't come here, I'll ask Sixth Sister to kill you." Wang Yuetong suddenly said coldly, "1." Gu Yunxia's face changed slightly, and she said in a slightly heavier tone, "Teacher Yang." Yang Mengjiang let out a bitter laugh. He felt blood gushing out of his throat again. He forcefully swallowed the blood in his mouth. Tasting the taste of blood in his mouth, he felt a sense of emptiness in his body. Even his legs felt weak. He walked with difficulty to Li Tianlan, and said in a hoarse voice, "Li Tianlan, what I did just now was inappropriate. I apologize to you." Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and smiled. Under the gaze of the higher-ups of the school, he suddenly lifted his leg and kicked Yang Mengjiang in the chest. In the same position. But the difference was that Li Tianlan used all his strength. Bang! Yang Mengjiang's body flew high. Whether by coincidence or on purpose, his body landed in front of Gu Yunxia, at her feet. Chapter 114. No one expected that an ordinary actual combat lesson would turn into such a situation. Several of the most promising experts in the class besieged the tutor. The headmaster, the director of the teaching office, the director of the political department, and other senior officials were present at the same time. Yang Mengjiang, who was also a senior official of the school, apologized to a freshman in person. What was even more unexpected was that Yang Mengjiang actually rejected him and even kicked him in the same way that Yang Mengjiang did earlier. Although he was injured, the strength and speed of the wind and thunder veins were terrifying. Especially in terms of strength, Li Tianlan was in the chi-controlling realm, but his pure strength was not inferior to that of an expert in the fire-flaming realm. Yang Mengjiang had been seriously injured by the siege. Under Li Tianlan's kick, his body flew back nearly 20 meters and landed in front of Gu Yunxia, coughing up blood. For a moment, he couldn't even move. "I don't accept it." His calm and gentle voice resounded throughout the entire venue, without the slightest bit of anger or pleasure, but everyone who heard this sentence felt their scalps go numb for no reason. This kid was really too strong-willed. Gu Yunxia's eyes flashed with viciousness and resentment. She squatted down slightly, helped Yang Mengjiang up, and handed him to the assistant beside her. When she straightened up again, she had a gentle and calm smile on her face. What Mr. Yang did today was really inappropriate. She paused, and her voice became softer and softer. She whispered, "The school will discuss a punishment decision as soon as possible. I don't know if you are satisfied with this explanation, Tianlan?" "I'm not satisfied," Li Tianlan said with a smile. He barely suppressed his injury and moved his body. There was suddenly a strong fighting will like a raging fire in his pupils. "What do you want, Tianlan?" Gu Yunxia narrowed her eyes and said in a feminine tone, but her fingers unconsciously contracted. This was her almost instinctive action every time she wanted to kill someone. Today's matter involved the Wang family of Beihai, Mount Shu, and Jade Pool, and the academics in Sai City. This seemed to be a small matter, but if it was not handled well, it would become extremely troublesome. Therefore, Gu Yunxia had made up her mind to compromise for the time being. After this matter was over, she still had ways to deal with Li Tianlan. "I just said I'm not satisfied. What can I do?" Li Tianlan chuckled and said, "There are some things that you can't do without strength, no matter how unwilling you are. Director Gu, am I right? He calmly glanced around and continued, that's why I just want to continue my lessons. However, there's no need to trouble Teacher Yang to name names. Since it's an actual combat class that can strengthen one's combat strength and allow one to get to know one another better, then let's be more straightforward. Among the freshmen, there are a few that I want to challenge, so I hope that the teachers can fulfill my wish. Gu Yunxia's expression changed slightly, and she subconsciously glanced in the direction of Gu Yulan. Her soft eyes gradually turned cold, and there was a hint of threat in her eyes. Li Tianlan's smile was gentle like a breeze, but there was a hint of undisguised killing intent in his eyes when he looked at Gu Yunxia. Their gazes collided in the air, and it was a tit for tat. In the gloomy sky, the atmosphere suddenly became bleak. Tianlan, do you insist? Gu Yunxia asked slowly. Her words could be interpreted as a threat, but they could also be interpreted as her last warning. Li Tianlan stopped talking nonsense. He held Wang Yuetong's hand and walked back to the platform step by step with firm steps. Tianlan, you're injured. Zhuang Huayang frowned slightly. He didn't know how serious Li Tianlan's injury was, but in this case, since he was injured, it was better not to fight. He could vent his anger at any time. It's okay, Li Tianlan said without looking back. Gu Yunxia glanced at Li Tianlan coldly, then looked at Zhuang Huayang and said softly, please make a decision, headmaster. I agree. Before Zhuang Huayang could speak, the enchantress made her attitude clear. I have no objection either. Yi Fengqing looked at Li Tianlan's figure on the platform with interest, and the appreciation in his eyes grew stronger. Zhuang Huayang glanced at Tribulation beside him, intentionally or unintentionally. Tribulation didn't say a word. His figure gradually became distorted and illusory. A black shadow appeared in front of Zhuang Huayang, but he himself had already left the #1 training ground. Was this a tacit agreement? Zhuang Huayang narrowed his eyes and nodded. That's it. Tianlan, who do you want to challenge? Li Tianlan had already stepped onto the platform. On the 3-meter-high platform in the gloomy sky, Li Tianlan's figure seemed very small, but it was extremely clear, clearly reflected in everyone's sight. Them. Li Tianlan pointed in a direction. In the direction he pointed, most of the freshmen he pointed at scattered instinctively, and a small group close together appeared in everyone's sight. In the crowd, Gu Yulan stared at Li Tianlan's finger pointing at her. She pursed her red lips and said nothing, but her eyes were full of killing intent. Lu Dongyu, who was also pointed at, remained calm. Su Yunzong, the most irascible one, suddenly clenched his fist and said in a ferocious tone, I'll go and meet him. Stop. Gu Yulan said in a flat tone. Of course you'll go, but not now. Her eyes turned slightly and finally stopped on several ice-condensing realm experts on the periphery. She said in a soft and sweet voice, You guys go up. Don't rush to finish the fight quickly. Drag him with all your might and consume his strength. Several ice-condensing realm experts from the flames of war looked pale. They looked at each other and subconsciously looked at Lu Dongyu. Go. Lu Dongyu said with a dull face. The one being challenged, come up. Zhuang Huayang's voice sounded. As a headmaster, he personally presided over an actual combat lesson. This lesson was of a high standard. An ice-condensing realm expert stepped forward. His face was pale. Standing in front of Li Tianlan, he opened his mouth and said slowly, My name is. Before he finished his words, Li Tianlan's figure had directly appeared in front of him. He punched. The human emperor did not show up. Li Tianlan's joints all over his body shook wildly. He concentrated all his strength into one punch and hit the opponent's chest hard. On the platform, all the air shook violently and then twisted wildly. In the gloomy and cold air, there seemed to be a sudden wind, fierce and overbearing. The ice-condensing realm expert who had just stepped onto the platform suddenly changed his expression. He subconsciously crossed his hands in front of his chest. Li Tianlan's punch came across the air. Cruel and merciless? A trace of ferocity flashed in his eyes. Endless hostility filled his heart and spread all over his body. I'll show you what is really cruel and merciless. Bang! The crazy power went through his arms and hit his chest. On the platform, which was covered by the twisted air and looked a little fuzzy, a low but dull and desperate scream accompanied by the sound of bones breaking rang out. The ice-condensing realm expert from the Flames of War had just stepped onto the platform and was blown off the platform like a sandbag. The punch hit his chest through his arms, but a lot of blood burst out of his back. The lonely and desperate figure crossed the platform and fell heavily in front of Xianxia. He twitched twice and then stopped moving. Next, Li Tianlan said calmly. Xianxia finally could not keep the smile on her face. Her expression became extremely gloomy. An ice-condensing realm expert was nothing in Kunlun City. But the Flames of War, whether in the Sky Academy or in Kunlun City, was a force of Kunlun City. Li Tianlan deliberately punched an elite of the Flames of War in front of him. Xianxia felt as if someone had slapped her in the face. It was a burning pain. She squatted down and checked the injury of the injured person. She suddenly raised her head, and her eyes seemed to be spewing fire. Under the punch, all the bones of the student in front of her had been completely broken, and his internal organs were almost completely destroyed. With such an injury, he would not die as long as he was treated in time. But it would be extremely difficult for him to recover. Li Tianlan did not kill anyone in the actual combat lesson. But what was the difference between such a method and killing him? Cruel and merciless. Cruel and merciless. Xianxia thought of Yang Mingjiang's comment. She gritted her teeth and said nothing. Bang! On the platform, Li Tianlan moved like a dragon. The second elite of the Flames of War had just stood firm when Li Tianlan kicked him in the abdomen again. A lot of blood burst out of his body like a blood mist. His body fell down the platform along the same trajectory and fell beside Xianxia again. Headmaster! Seeing all this with his own eyes, Yang Mengjiang's lips trembled, and stars flashed before his eyes. There was no doubt that this was Li Tianlan's most powerful counterattack to his words of being cruel and merciless. Li Tianlan only broke his opponent's arm with one punch in the first battle. How was that cruel and merciless? In front of him, he only used one move to completely destroy his opponent in one move. Such a style was really cruel and merciless. Go on, Li Tianlan said softly, with a mellow and gentle smile. Headmaster, look at what he is doing. These are all elites of our Kunlun City, no, the Sky Academy. Headmaster, this guy should be killed. Yang Mengjiang shouted in a trembling voice. Because of extreme anger, his dark face had turned blood red. All your Kunlun City? Did he finally let it slip? Zhuang Huayang's eyes turned cold. He took a deep look at Yang Mengjiang and said casually, Tianlan, be careful. Okay. Li Tianlan nodded and smiled, but in his mind, he thought of Lu Xiaowei, who had died in his hands, Yang Mingjiang's kick just now, and Kunlun City. It was an organization that took it for granted to bully others and said that the other party should be killed when being bullied. What a great power center of the special warfare system of Jianghu State. Li Tianlan smiled and looked at his opponent, who walked to the high platform with an uneasy face. His figure flashed and he kicked again. Bang! The same bloody mist broke out in the sky. But this time, the opponent did not fly out of the high platform. Li Tianlan's foot fell on him, and all the power exploded in his body in an instant. There was a thud. His body fell to the ground and he died on the spot. Li Tianlan looked at Yang Mengjiang with a playful look in his eyes. It was a look that Yang Mengjiang was very familiar with. Just now, he looked at Li Tianlan with this kind of look, provocative and cruel. Puff! Yang Mengjiang spat out another mouthful of blood and was on the verge of collapse. Li Tianlan kicked the body in front of him off the high platform and continued, Who else? The corner of Xianxia's mouth moved. She forced herself to swallow the blood that gushed out of her throat, turned silently and said coldly, Let's go. With the support of the headmaster, Li Tianlan was unscrupulous. Xianxia didn't want to see what would happen next. She turned around, asked her assistant to support Yang Mengjiang, and left directly. Director Gu. On the high platform, Li Tianlan suddenly spoke in a flat voice. Xianxia suddenly turned around, and her killing intent soared. She said coldly, What's the matter? Nothing. Li Tianlan burst out laughing and said in a clear and bright voice, Have I ever told you that you're so ugly, just like an old witch? Young and vigorous, young and frivolous. Ha ha ha. Beside Zhuang Huayang, a burst of laughter suddenly sounded. Yi Fengqing looked at Li Tianlan with appreciation and said, Well said, Tianlan. Based on what you said, when your injury is healed, I must drink with you. Yi Fengqing was called a madman in Yuzhou. He was arrogant and unruly. If it weren't for his fearlessness, he wouldn't have come to the Sky Academy to be a director of the political department. This position seemed to be prominent, but compared with the power of the Yi family, it was almost equivalent to being sent to the frontier. Xianxia stood there stiffly. After 5 minutes, she took a deep look at Li Tianlan, turned around, and left. Li Tianlan glanced at his back, then turned around and asked Gu Yulan, "Who else?" "I'll do it." Su Yunzong suddenly roared. Ignoring Gu Yulan's eyes, he stepped toward the high platform step by step. Flames rose from his body. At this moment, Su Yunzong was like a sun, scorching and cruel. He stepped onto the high platform. Without a word, he roared and rushed directly to Li Tianlan. He completely condensed the innate divine power given to him by the thunder vein. In the flames, the whole high platform shook wildly as he sprinted. He moved faster and faster, like a giant beast. The air in front of Li Tianlan was completely twisted. In a trance, he seemed to be pushing a side of the world forward. He controlled the air to form the wind. The wind suddenly rose. The flames were blown away by the wind. The two approached each other in an instant. What appeared in front of Su Yunzong was also a tightly clenched iron fist. Su Yunzong roared and raised his hand to meet the fist without hesitation. Crack! Their fists retracted as soon as they touched. Li Tianlan suddenly took a step forward. The twisted air whistled wildly around him. Li Tianlan took the opportunity to turn around and hit Su Yunzong's chest hard with his elbow. Bang! Su Yunzong suffered a heavy blow, but he refused to retreat. The air around him had turned into blades of wind. In an instant, his burly body was covered in blood. But the expression on his face grew more and more ferocious. He grabbed Li Tianlan's arm and roared. With a furious roar, he swung Li Tianlan's body up and flung him hard. Boom! Li Tianlan's body rubbed against the ground, leaving a shocking trail of blood. He hit the iron railings around the high platform. The railings, which were surrounded by thick and long steel bars, were instantly deformed. Li Tianlan spat out a mouthful of blood, but he continued to rush forward without hesitation. Su Yunzong, who was also covered in blood, held a flaming long saber in his hand. The flames around him bloomed to the extreme, and he slashed at Li Tianlan. 3 Elements final hit. It was the core unique skill of Kunlun City, the 10 skills of true martial arts. The 10th skill was known as the strongest in the invincible realm, and the other 9 skills were also outstanding in each realm. The human emperor in Li Tianlan's hand stretched out. In the silver flowing light, he held a long spear. The spear smashed hard on the ground. Boom! The 3-meter-high high platform, which was extremely solid with a large number of steel bars and concrete, suddenly shook. On the floor, countless dust and gravel mixed with steel bars flew out and hit Su Yunzong. Su Yunzong waved his saber wildly, destroying everything. Li Tianlan, who was faster than him, took advantage of the length of the weapon and stabbed his spear directly at Su Yunzong's chest. The sound was ear-piercing. Li Tianlan's figure seemed to have completely melted into the air, blurring. Only the silver spear shone brightly and moved forward. Su Yunzong could only retreat. One advanced and the other retreated. The distance of more than 10 meters was covered in a flash. Su Yunzong's huge body hit the railings on the edge of the high platform, and his whole body turned quickly against the railings. The silver spear stabbed into the gap between the railings. Before Su Yunzong could fight back, Li Tianlan's silver spear suddenly rose. Bang! Under the huge force, the silver spear directly smashed the steel railings. Dust flew up from the edge of the high platform, and all the steel bars were broken into countless pieces in an instant, shooting off the platform. Fierce and violent. A chi-controlling realm martial artist fighting against a fire-flaming realm martial artist. Li Tianlan's eyes were dark, and he seemed to have gone completely crazy. The silver spear whistled and danced in the flames and twisted air. The whole high platform was in danger in the battle between the two. Su Yunzong, who was dodging in a panic, looked furious. The long saber in his hand disappeared, and in an instant, the flames scattered. The 4th move of the 10 skills of true martial arts. 4 moves to 1. Watch out! Under the platform, Gu Yulan, who was supposed to be full of confidence, suddenly narrowed her eyes and gave a warning. In a place that no one noticed, A figure that was exactly the same as Li Tianlan suddenly appeared behind Su Yunzong. It was a vivid imitation of Li Tianlan. The flames of 4 moves to 1 gathered in front of Su Yunzong and instantly surrounded Li Tianlan. The air in front of him fluctuated slightly. Li Tianlan stood quietly, motionless. But in everyone's sight, Li Tianlan had already switched places with the shadow. He raised his spear and whistled down. The shadow in front of Su Yunzong was swallowed by the flames and instantly disappeared. The silver spear whistled all over the sky and hit Su Yunzong's head without reservation. Boom! The high platform, which was on the verge of collapse, collapsed with a loud bang in the last shot. In the smoke and snow mist, Su Yunzong's body completely collapsed under the spear. Only flesh and blood flew all over the sky, and he died without a whole body. Cruel and ruthless. When the extreme violence was deduced to the extreme, it was an art that was enough to make everyone's scalp numb and heart tremble. An art that was cruel and bloody to the extreme. The smoke and dust drifted. In the ruins of the high platform, only Li Tianlan's voice continued to ring. Who else? On this day, in the first actual combat lesson since the beginning of the Sky Academy, Yang Mengjiang, the tutor of the actual combat lesson, was seriously injured. 2 people died and 2 were seriously injured in the class. 4 people were removed from the class. The flames of war, which had been awe-inspiring in the Sky Academy last time, was almost gone. In Li Tianlan's seemingly calm but insolent momentum was close to baring his fangs and brandishing his claws. Su Yunzong, a fire-flaming realm expert and a young core disciple of Kunlun City, died. Gu Yulan. Chapter 115. Su Yunzong died in the battle. The flames of war was almost removed from the Sky Academy. Now that things had escalated to this point, the actual combat class that was halfway through was naturally left unsettled. After the bodies and the wounded were carried away, Zhuang Huayang dismissed the team and personally sent Li Tianlan back to the dormitory. He was not afraid that Gu Yunxia and others would attack Li Tianlan. He did this to express his attitude to the whole academy. Li Tianlan's face grew paler, but after restraining his killing intent, his aura had completely stabilized. The benefits brought to him by that set of immortality potion were almost unimaginable. As soon as the injury broke out in his body, the vitality locked by the longevity lock in his body began to surge and break through the blockage, quickly healing his injury. After the fierce battle, although his injury could not be said to be completely healed, it was basically not a big problem. His body, which originally needed a month to recuperate, now seemed to be completely better in a week at most. Even Li Tianlan himself was a little stunned by such an effect. The most precious treasure of the Wang family of Beihai was just like their unique skill. Its effect could be said to be against the natural order. In contrast, Wang Yuetong's state could be said to be the worst. Although the process of upgrading from the peak of the ice-condensing realm was very short, her consumption was unimaginable. The so-called consumption of potential was temporarily unfathomable, but the consumption of physical strength and spirit was extremely obvious. As soon as she returned to the dormitory, she put her arms around Li Tianlan's waist, muttered that she was sleepy, and then directly closed her eyes behind Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan found it funny but also felt distressed. He could borrow the power of the ice-condensing realm or even the fire-flaming realm when he was in the qi-controlling realm because he had reached that realm before. But Wang Yuetong did not recultivate. Her improvement was completely using the combat strength that should not have belonged to her. In doing so, she needed to pay a much higher price than Li Tianlan. Now Wang Yuetong was almost in a state of half coma and half sleep, and no one knew how long she would rest this time. He carefully carried Wang Yuetong into the bedroom, put her body on the bed, and carefully covered her with the quilt. Wang Yuetong, who was out of Li Tianlan's arms, seemed to move a little uneasily. Her little hands subconsciously grasped the quilt, and she slowly calmed down. Appreciating the little princess's quiet and delicate sleeping posture, Li Tianlan's heart was filled with tenderness. He lowered his head and kissed Wang Yuetong's face gently. Then he straightened up and walked out of the bedroom. In the living room, Li Beitian was standing beside Zhuang Huayang and bragging. Li Tianlan didn't know what he had said before. When he came out, Li Beitian was already halfway through his speech. I was by Tianlan's side at that time. Headmaster, you didn't see it at that time. Tianlan just raised the brush and waved it. Did you see that? The 3 words, East Emperor Palace, were written in one go. The whole living room was filled with sword energy, including the floor, the walls, and the furniture. They couldn't even withstand a single blow. Let me tell you. Cough. Li Tianlan couldn't bear it anymore. He coughed and interrupted Li Baitian's serious bragging. It was fine if Li Baitian exaggerated a little occasionally. But Li Baitian didn't know him. He wrote the 3 words East Emperor Palace for nearly a day. But Li Baitian wrote it in one go. It was outrageous. However, Zhuang Huayang didn't seem to pay attention to what Li Baitian said. He just looked at the wall covered with sword marks with a calm expression. The sword marks filled with pure sword essence were like a beautiful painting in his eyes. It was so beautiful that it fascinated him. Did you do it? Zhuang Huayang glanced at Li Tianlan, who walked out of the bedroom, and said with a smile. Li Tianlan braced himself and said calmly, I'm going to talk to the headmaster about this. These furniture need to be changed. I still have credits here. It should be enough to deduct. Okay. Zhuang Huayang thought for a while and said slowly, I won't deduct credits. The college will help you change the furniture, but I hope the wall will remain the same. These sword marks, just stay here. Li Tianlan was stunned and looked at Zhuang Huayang. Zhuang Huayang didn't look at Li Tianlan but still looked at the countless sword marks on the wall. He said softly, This is a treasure, Tianlan. The sword energy left here may disappear soon, but the pure sword intent will always exist. After you graduate, if someone lives in your dormitory and looks at these sword marks, they can almost be said to be your students if they become successful in the future. Just leave the wall like this. The Sky Academy also needs such a special dormitory. Li Tianlan nodded casually. He was not interested in being a student for the time being. With his current realm at the peak of the Qi-controlling realm, he was really not qualified to be someone else's teacher. The sword intent on the surrounding walls was pure, but it wouldn't reveal the unique skills of the Li family. Since he could keep it without deducting credits, he naturally wouldn't have any objection. Zhuang Huayang's eyes fell on the plaque in front of him again. He stared at the 3 words that even stung his eyes when he first saw them. He said softly, East Emperor Palace. Is this the name of your team? Li Tianlan said yes. Suddenly, he thought of something and asked calmly, Headmaster, is there anything wrong with this name? No. It's good. Zhuang Huayang smiled and said, It sounds a little bold. Li Tianlan looked at his expression seriously. He asked again, Headmaster, haven't you heard of the name East Emperor? Zhuang Huayang looked at Li Tianlan with a smile. When he saw Li Tianlan's serious face, he suddenly froze. I haven't heard of it. Zhuang Huayang shook his head and said, I know a mythical figure called East Emperor Tai. Why? Do you mean this East Emperor has a background? How can the heavenly son of Jianghu state in recent decades have no background? Li Tianlan said flatly, his name is Dongqing Huangtu. He didn't know why he was so attached to this name. Every time he thought of this name with infinite contradictions and mysteries, he would subconsciously figure it out. Maybe it was because of the notebook in Qin Weibai's hand. Or maybe it was because of Qin Weibai's sad and helpless eyes when she mentioned this name. Heavenly Son? Zhuang Huayang raised his eyebrows in surprise. He took a deep look at Li Tianlan and said slowly, How can there be any heavenly son in recent decades? This word is not used casually. Even if others use this word, they will add some modifiers in front of it. For example, Wang Xianxia and Gu Hanzhan are known as young heavenly sons. The word young is the most important. This generation's Wang Xianxia, the previous generation's Tribulation, and the previous generation's Wang Tianzong can only be regarded as people with the potential to become heavenly sons. For hundreds of years, only the ancestor of the Wang family of Beihai can be called a heavenly son. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes slightly. His eyes were complicated, but he still didn't give up and asked, Headmaster, haven't you heard of Dongqing Huangtu? Sounds like a member of the Dongqing family? Zhuang Huayang looked at Li Tianlan strangely and said, I haven't heard of him. Li Tianlan was silent. Zhuang Huayang was an old fox at his age. What he thought and even the emotions on the surface were not what he could figure out now. He couldn't tell whether Zhuang Huayang was telling the truth or not. If what he said wasn't true, then what kind of secret was hidden behind the name Dongqing Huangtu that people like Zhuang Huayang still didn't want to talk about it after so many years after his death? a dignified heaven's chosen one. Yet he was unknown. How ironic was that? But if what he said was true, what did that mean? Zhuang Huayang, who was nearly 70 years old, was a general of Jianghu state, but he hadn't even heard of Dongqing Huangtu's name. If that was the truth, that could only mean one thing. Dongqing Huangtu didn't exist. Tianlan? Zhuang Huayang frowned and asked, "Are you all right?" "I'm fine." Li Tianlan shook his head, feeling complicated. "It's good that you're fine. Take care of yourself. I suggest you take some Chinese medicine. As for gene potions like healing, you can only use them for emergencies. Take as little as you can." Zhuang Huayang glanced at Li Tianlan and said, "I'm going to Yuzhou soon. Let's talk about other things when I come back." Li Tianlan's eyes narrowed. Zhuang Huayang going to Yuzhou? At this time, it was most likely that he went to Yuzhou for the murder of Gu Chongjiang. An expert at the level of governor was killed in his own country, which was enough to cause a sensation in the whole Jianghu state. So even if he knew that Zhuang Huayang had nothing to do with this trip, Li Tianlan still felt a little nervous subconsciously. "I'm fine." Zhuang Huayang shook his head and said with a light smile. Li Tianlan nodded slightly and didn't say much. Zhuang Huayang turned around and was about to leave. He glanced around casually and happened to see Yu Qingyan standing in the corner. Yu Qingyan's pretty face was pale, and she still stood there in a daze, as if she was lost in thought. "Qingyan, are you all right?" Zhuang Huayang asked with concern. He and Yu Donglai were old friends for many years. Now that Yu Donglai handed his granddaughter to him, he must fulfill his responsibility. "I'm fine." Yu Qingyan became alert, shook her head in a panic and stammered, I'm going to call Grandpa." She turned around and trotted straight to the bedroom. Zhuang Huayang smiled thoughtfully and left quickly. In the bedroom, Yu Qingyan sat on the bed, holding the phone nervously, waiting for the call to be connected. The phone rang twice. Yu Donglai's kind and soft voice sounded, which made Yu Qingyan calm down. "Qingyan? What's wrong? You just left and you miss Grandpa?" "Grandpa!" Yu Qingyan's inner nervousness gradually disappeared. But she still stammered. "What's wrong? Did someone bully you? Where's Tianlan? Give him the phone." Yu Qingyan suddenly became nervous. He loved this precious granddaughter from the bottom of his heart and was afraid that she would be wronged. If he didn't spoil her, Yu Qingyan might have a different character today. No. Yu Qingyan took a deep breath and said softly, "Grandpa, Yang Mengjiang bullied Brother Li. In the class just now, Sister Yuatong led us to seriously injure Yang Mengjiang." At the other end of the phone, Yu Donglai's breath paused and he said softly, "And then?" "And then?" Yu Qingyan hesitated, lowered her voice again, and said in a trembling voice, "And then I used a drop of cardinal blood." The other end of the phone suddenly fell into a dead silence. Cardinal. This was something that only he and Yu Qingyan knew. Over the years, Yu Donglai had spent more time and energy on the linnet than on Yu Qingyan. In 20 years, the linnet had taken shape. If it evolved once with external forces, it would become a vermilion bird. This was the most poisonous thing in the world. Its toxicity was as fierce as raging fire and could be called unparalleled in the world. A drop of cardinal blood. Yu Donglai pondered for a long time before he took a deep breath and said gently, "It's okay. Qingyan, you did the right thing. Don't worry." His voice was still old and tired, but this time, there was a hint of pride in it. Yu Qingyan nodded her little head hard and said yes. "Bastard, this bastard, I must kill him, kill him." In the director's office, Gu Yunxia's assistant helped Yang Mengjiang to sit on the sofa. Yang Mengjiang, who had been silent all the way, finally couldn't help but roar angrily after entering the office. Gu Yunxia stood in front of the window and took a deep breath before she slowly turned around and sighed. "Mengjiang, this time we were careless. Who could have thought that Wang Yuatong, Li Beitian, and Ning Qianqing would risk their lives for that guy? It seems that their relationship is not simple. Wang Yuatong fell in love with him in just a few days. This is the most unexpected thing." Yang Mengjiang pulled out a cigarette, lit it, and took a big puff. The smoke entered his lungs. Yang Mengjiang was so angry that he only felt a burning heat all over his body. He shook his head in annoyance and did not speak. Let's find another chance later. This time we can't just let it go, but we have to pay attention to the way in the future. Gu Yunxia pondered and said word by word, outside the Sky Academy, that guy is a non-entity. But at least in the academy, he has now become a figure that can't be ignored. We can't continue to fight on a small scale. Next time we take action, we must be clean and neat, and don't leave any evidence. Yang Mengjiang took a big puff of the cigarette and nodded. The burning feeling on his body was getting stronger and stronger. In the blink of an eye, he was sweating all over. Gu Yunxia, who knew his bad temper, only thought that he was angry and didn't think much about it. She took out her mobile phone and said with a smile, "Take a seat first. I'll go to the lounge to call the governor." Yang Mengjiang nodded and watched Gu Yunxia's back disappear. He lit another cigarette. The heat spread from the soles of his feet and kept rising, surpassing his chest and abdomen. The rolling heat waves rushed straight to his brain. Yang Mengjiang even felt that his body was on fire. He put out the cigarette, looked at Gu Yunxia's assistant, and frowned. "Do you have water? I want ice." "Yes," the assistant said in a soft voice. She was also a freshman who graduated from the Sky Academy. In that year, she was also a famous beauty. After graduating and staying at the school, she followed Gu Yunxia and naturally became a bargaining chip for Gu Yunxia to win over some of her confidants. Not only Yang Mengjiang, but even many promising ordinary male teachers had tasted her. "There's a refrigerator in the lounge. I'll get you some water." The assistant smiled charmingly and turned to the lounge. "This slut." Yang Mengjiang stared at the assistant swaying soft buttocks with fiery eyes, and his heart was getting hotter and hotter. It was on fire. Yang Mengjiang only felt that the fire in his body was getting stronger and stronger, and he could hardly suppress it. He opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but he didn't make a sound for a while. Yang Mengjiang's face changed, and he finally realized that there was something wrong with the heat in his body. He subconsciously put his hand into his mouth, and his face instantly became desperate and pale. In a short time, the tongue in his mouth had disappeared, and even his teeth were melting rapidly. The burning heat instantly turned into a big fire. It was really on fire. The strange green flame instantly sprang out of his body and instantly spread all over his body. Yang Mengjiang's face twisted, and his body twitched in the flame, but he couldn't even make a sound. In a very short time, his body twitched more and more weakly, and finally stopped moving, and then burned rapidly with the sofa. Crack! The door of the lounge was pulled open. The assistant, who was smiling charmingly and even a little slutty, walked out of the lounge with a bottle of ice water. She glanced in the direction of the sofa and suddenly froze. In the office, Yang Mengjiang's figure had disappeared, and with him, the whole sofa disappeared. The place was empty, as if nothing had ever existed. The secretary was stunned, turned around subconsciously, and hurried back to the lounge. In the lounge, Gu Yunxia looked serious and silently put down the phone. The assistant held the water tightly in her hand and said nervously, "Director, Mr. Yang has left, and he stole our sofa." "Yang Mengjiang? Stole the sofa?" Gu Yunxia looked puzzled, stared at the assistant strangely, and said, "What are you talking about?" Gu Yunxia soon understood that the assistant was not talking nonsense. On this day, a supernatural disappearance occurred in the Sky Academy. Yang Mengjiang, the leader of the course group of the practical lesson of the academy, mysteriously disappeared in Gu Yunxia's office. He seemed to disappear out of thin air, with a sofa, and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Gu Yunxia asked everyone and even adjusted the surveillance, but she didn't find Yang Mengjiang leaving, nor did she find him leaving with the sofa. It was in this office that Yang Mengjiang disappeared without warning and without a trace. Everyone in the entire Sky Academy was confused, and no one knew what happened. In the evening of the same day, Yuzhou City. In the Hidden Dragon Sea, the power center of Jianghu State. President Li Huaqing of Jianghu State personally convened a meeting of the decision-making committee. Zhuang Huayang, the headmaster of the Sky Academy, Fan Tianyin, the Minister of Security of Jianghu State, was invited to attend the meeting. Gu Xingyun, the god of war of Jianghu State, who rarely attended such meetings, attended the meeting. The meeting discussed the death of Gu Changjiang, the director of Huating Special Operations Bureau. Gu Xingyun took out the video. At the place where Gu Changjiang last disappeared, Dongqing Wudi, the commander of the Border Praetorian Corps, and Zhuang Huayang, the headmaster of the Sky Academy, appeared on the scene respectively. Gu Changjiang's body was not found, but the roughly estimated time of death was very consistent with the time when Dongqing Wudi and Zhuang Huayang appeared. The entire decision-making committee was waiting for the explanation of the two. Dongqing Wudi and Zhuang Huayang seriously clarified themselves one by one. Zhong Yongming, the top leader of Huiting, was also a member of the decision-making committee. Although he was a little reluctant, he still proved that on the day they met, neither Dongqing Wudi nor Zhuang Huayang had any conflict with Gu Changjiang. It was just that Qin Weibai, the second in command of Samsara, had some unpleasantness with Gu Changjiang. This explanation was easily accepted by everyone. After all, whether it was Gu Changjiang, Zhuang Huayang, or Dongqing Wudi, they were all senior officials of Jianghu state. Not to mention that they did not have conflicts. Even if they did have conflicts, they would not be killed. Some basic rules were that everyone must abide by. So everyone's attention was focused in another direction. The time of Gu Changjiang's death was unclear, and the range of his death was relatively large. During this relatively long period of time, there was also another person who caught people's attention on the path that Gu Changjiang had taken. Moreover, this person definitely had the means to kill Gu Changjiang silently. The second master of the Jiang family of South America, Jiang Chenyan. Since a huge foreign force was involved, the tone of the people at the meeting was a little cautious. Finally, after Gu Xingyun said that he would investigate it clearly, the matter seemed to come to an end for the time being. But Gu Xingyun stopped blaming for the time being, and someone opened fire on Kunlun City. At the meeting of the highest level of the decision-making committee of the empire, Zhuang Huayang, in front of several directors and all the members, bluntly said that the atmosphere inside the Sky Academy was now very unhealthy, with crooked ways and foul atmosphere everywhere. In Gu Xingyun's gloomy face, Zhuang Huayang directly named Gu Yunxia. He thought that Gu Yunxia was suspected of fanning evil winds. His position was ambiguous. He ignored the overall situation, and he would not unite his colleagues. He almost belittled Gu Yunxia as useless. At the same time, he also cited that during the entrance maneuver, Lu Xiaowei attacked the freshmen, and in the actual combat lesson, the teachers targeted the freshmen. Fan Tianyin, the Minister of Security of Jianghu State and a cadre of the Southeast Group, also said that he had received a call from his son, Fan Haoyu. It was said that Fan Haoyu was now very insecure in the Sky Academy. Driven by some school leaders with ambiguous positions, he even felt that he was living under the terrible pressure of Kunlun City, not in the Sky Academy. General Dongqing Wudi, who had been holding back his anger because of the explanation, flew into a rage and said that there was something wrong with the environment of the Sky Academy. Even Zhuang Huayang, the headmaster, was responsible. He suggested that all Gu Yunxia's posts in the Sky Academy be revoked. In the face of Gu Xingyun, the famous god of massacre of Jianghu State pointed out the duties of the Sky Academy without hesitation. It was to cultivate talents in the special warfare system and the military system for Jianghu State, not to raise dogs for Kunlun City. Yi Dongsheng, one of the leaders of the Southeast Group and known as the God of Army, also expressed his support for Dongqing Wudi with a cold face. The academics, the giant group, and the Wang family of Beihai. Because of a little thing that no one would notice at this time, the three parties reprimanded Gu Yunxia's behavior with harsh words, as if they had made an appointment. It was almost equivalent to pointing at the nose and rebuking Kunlun City for having bad intentions. A director of the Prince Group said a few words for Kunlun City in a perfunctory way, which could be regarded as a way to smooth things over. In the face of the storm of reprimands, Gu Xingyun, the god of war of Jianghu State, was expressionless all the time, as still as a mountain. But everyone at the meeting could see the flash of anger in his eyes. A storm suddenly arose in the conference room. The sky over Yuzhou City was covered with haze. Chapter 116. Tender yellow leaves poked out of the willows, green pines and cypresses appeared among the dense needles, buds sprouted on the crabapple trees, and the poplar trees grew taller and taller. The spring breeze swept over the lake, trees, pavilions, and lawns. The hidden dragon sea in early spring was picturesque, full of vitality. The spring scenery was boundless and beautiful. The hidden dragon sea was the general name of the hidden sea and the dragon sea. It was said to be a sea, but in fact, it was just a small lake with clear water. In the center of power of Jianghu State, which was full of solemnity, this lake, which was called a sea, could be said to be the softest place. Boating on the lake, even the greatest pressure seemed to disappear without a trace. In the morning, at the junction of the Hidden Sea and the Dragon Sea, two quaint boats drifted aimlessly with the waves. Gu Xingyun, the governor of Kunlun City, known as the war god of Jianghu State, sat in the boat with a fishing rod in his hand, looking calm and gentle. Gu Xingyun looked like he was in his 50s, with gray hair at the temples and an elegant appearance. His figure was not very strong and burly, and he didn't seem to have the arrogant and fierce momentum of the war god at all. Whether seen from a distance or up close, he looked like a very elegant and gentle middle-aged man, calm and collected, but he gave everyone a feeling of unfathomable in a trance. He put down the fishing rod in his hand, took out a cigarette, lit it and took a puff. The smoke drifted and fell into the lake casually. Gu Xingyun quietly observed the hidden Dragon Sea, which was full of spring, with a soft smile and a happy spirit. Who could have thought that at the meeting of the decision-making committee last night, the war god of Jianghu State was jointly attacked by the three groups and almost embarrassed? On another wooden boat beside Gu Xingyun, a ferocious-looking, even ugly one-eyed man kept observing Gu Xingyun's reaction. Seeing the smile on this war god's face, he subconsciously reached out his hand, touched his extremely eye-catching bald head, and said helplessly, "Your Highness, are we just going to let them do whatever they want?" Gu Xingyun, who seemed to have been thinking alone, slightly raised his eyebrows. This elegant old man with a prominent identity and great power was not sharp at all. His casual movement of raising his eyebrows immediately made him look more mature and charming. He took a puff of the cigarette and said with a smile, "What's your opinion, Fengbua?" Gu Fengbua. He was one of the deputy governors of Kunlun City, and also the most important right-hand man of Gu Xingyun in the Hidden Dragon Sea. He was ugly. After losing an eye in a fierce battle many years ago, he looked even more ferocious, making people want to stay away from him at first sight. It seemed that his character had changed because of his appearance. He behaved cruelly and was very fond of unconventional methods. Especially in recent years, as his strength surpassed the peak of the Thundershocking Realm and stayed between the fulfillment of the Thundershocking Realm and the half-step Invincible Realm, his style of doing things became more arrogant. He was notorious in the special warfare system. He was the most famous mad dog around Gu Xingyun, who would bite whoever he saw and would not let go until he was bitten to death. Since Gu Xingyun became the war god of Jianghu State, he had always been extremely steady. He cooperated with Gu Fengbua, who was surly and ruthless, and they had a tacit understanding. They could even be regarded as a golden partner. Years of friendship and tacit understanding made Gu Fengbua never treat Gu Xingyun as an outsider. He held the fishing rod in his hand and said coldly, "Who is Zhuang Huayang? He is an old man who dares to challenge your highness without weighing his own weight. Does he really think he is the same as he was 5 years ago? Your highness, I'm going to challenge Zhuang Huayang and find a chance to kill him. At worst, I'll disable him, which is also a lesson to others. If we don't take a stand this time, any Tom, Dick, or Harry will jump out and bother us. So we might as well take this opportunity to make an example of him." Gu Xingyun did not speak and seemed to be moved. He thought about it for 5 minutes, then shook his head slightly and said with a smile, "Headmaster Zhuang is not a chicken. 5 years ago, you were no match for him. 5 years ago, I just entered the peak of the Thunder-Shocking Realm. Naturally, I was no match for him." Gu Fengbua looked dissatisfied and wanted to say more, but he was directly interrupted by Gu Xingyun. "Even now, you are no match for Headmaster Zhuang 5 years ago. Forget it. The old headmaster has been in the Sky Academy for many years and has students all over the world. He is a hero to Jianghu State and the special warfare system. This is his last stop. I very much hope that he can reach the finish line safely." Gu Xingyun paused, looked at Gu Fengbua, who was still unconvinced and looked uglier, and said calmly, "I'm serious." Gu Fengbua gritted his teeth and did not speak. Zhuang Huayang's state had declined severely in recent years, and he was even seriously inconsistent with the ranking of the top 10 contemporary experts in Jianghu State. This was a fact that everyone knew. 10 years ago was Zhuang Huayang's peak period. After Lu Tianqing's death, Zhuang Huayang ranked 4th among the top 10 contemporary experts in Jianghu State, second only to Wang Tianzong, Gu Xingyun, and Situ Tsungyue. 5 years ago, the top 10 experts were ranked again. Gu Qianchuan, the first elder of Kunlun City, Wei Kunlun, the Nirvana Swordmaster of Mount Shu, and Dongqing Wudi, the god of massacre of Zhongzhou state, surpassed Zhuang Huayang one by one. The ranking at that time was still true. But for an old man in his 70s, the most unforgiving thing was time. Another 5 years were coming. Zhuang Huayang's strength declined more and more seriously. He was old and frail. If he ranked again this year, it would be extremely difficult for him to get on the list. Gu Fengbo was a popular candidate for the top 10 experts this time. He hoped to defeat Zhuang Huayang and solidify his title as one of the top 10 experts in advance. At that time, Gu Xingyun, Gu Qianquan, and him would occupy 3 of the top 10 contemporary experts in Kunlun City. Who could compete with him? However, Gu Xingyun obviously did not want Zhuang Huayang to lose his integrity in his old age. During the 20 years in charge of the Sky Academy, Zhuang Huayang had sent away 6 generations of graduates. This was the real world with students. Gu Xingyun acted steadily. In the absence of benefits, he naturally did not want Gu Fengbo to attack Zhuang Huayang. Whether this matter succeeded or failed, it was likely to attract countless hostility, which was not what a wise man would do. So, let's just forget about it this time? Gu Fengbo took a deep breath, looked at Gu Xingyun, and waved his hand casually. A pack of cigarettes beside Gu Xingyun flew directly into his hand. He took one out and lit it silently. Forget it. Gu Xingyun nodded and said with a smile. These years, the foundation of Kunlun City has become more and more stable, and there are more and more people against Kunlun City. What's the big deal about a few superficial reprimands? Bear it and be steady. There will always be a time to get back at them in the future. As for now. He narrowed his eyes slightly, and his eyes flickered, but they were still not the sharpness and decisiveness that belonged to the god of war. His eyes flickered with a kind of cunning and trickery that had experienced ups and downs. He took a drag on the cigarette and continued, "The urgent task now is to find out who killed Chongjiang. I don't know why, when I think of this matter, I feel a little uneasy." Gu Fengbo said, "The task force has already gone to Huiting." Not enough. Gu Xingyun shook his head. "In a few days, I'm going to go to Huiting in person. Within a month, this matter must come to light." Gu Fengbo took a deep breath and whispered to himself, Dongqing Wudi, Zhuang Huayang, and even Jiang Qianyan, they all have enough strength to kill Chongjiang. In addition, there were 2 freshmen of the Sky Academy who appeared at the scene that day. These people are all suspects. Gu Xingyun took over and said, "But they are not very suspicious. The 2 freshmen may ignore it, but how can they kill Chongjiang? Do you think the unique skills of Kunlun City are the so-called secret books casually painted by charlatans? As for Dongqing Wudi and Zhuang Huayang, I've talked to Zhong Yongming. They didn't have a direct conflict that day. Even if they are narrow-minded and want to kill, they won't do it so quickly. Those 2 old foxes won't be so imprudent. Samsara and Qin Wei-bai are the most likely. But even if they want to provoke, Qin Wei-bai won't directly choose Gu Chongjiang as a breakthrough, and she went to the airport first." Gu Xingyun analyzed bit by bit, and finally there was only one name left. "What about Jiang Qianyan?" Gu Fengbo seemed to know what he was thinking and directly mentioned the name. He hesitated and continued, "A few days ago, First Elder seemed to be in Huiting." Crack! The fishing rod in Gu Xingyun's hand was directly crushed, and the fishing rod sank into the lake. A fish that had just been hooked escaped and escaped. Gu Xingyun was expressionless. He whispered to himself, "First Elder." In recent years, the foundation of Kunlun City had gradually stabilized, and some internal contradictions had gradually surfaced. For the Gu family, Gu Qianquan's bloodline was the real direct line, but now the power of Kunlun City was controlled by Gu Xingyun's bloodline. Gu Xingyun was unwilling to hand over power, and Gu Qianquan was unwilling to give up his orthodox status. Such contradictions were almost irreconcilable. And with the passage of time, without external pressure, these contradictions had become more and more obvious in recent years. As a confidant of the bloodline of the city governor, Gu Chongjiang had always been at odds with Gu Qianquan. It was normal for him to want to kill Gu Chongjiang. For many years, the Jiang family, a behemoth, had maintained a hazy connection with Kunlun City, both overtly and covertly. In fact, Gu Qianquan seemed to have a closer connection with them. But could this slightly closer relationship let Jiang Qianyan and the Jiang family participate in the internal fight of Kunlun City? Could it even let Jiang Qianyan, an expert of the invincible realm, personally clear the obstacles for Gu Qianchuan to seize power? Gu Fengbo seriously pondered for a while, shook his head and said hesitantly, First Elder can't offer such a bargaining chip. He can. Gu Xingyun said expressionlessly, but does he really dare to offer such a bargaining chip? A phone suddenly rang. Gu Xingyun took out his mobile phone and looked at the 3 words, Gu Yunxia, on the caller ID. He frowned slightly, picked it up, and chuckled. Yunxia, what's the matter? Gu Yunxia said something urgently on the other end of the phone. Gu Xingyun's smile suddenly disappeared. He silently put down the phone and narrowed his eyes. Your Highness, what's the matter? Gu Fengbo looked at him in confusion and asked. Yun sect is dead, Gu Xingyun said. Looking at Gu Fengbo's suddenly cold and ferocious face, he continued. Meng Jiang mysteriously disappeared in Yunxia's office. There was no clue for a whole day. Gu Fengbo clenched his fists tightly, his face livid. What an eventful time. Gu Xingyun sighed softly. The air around him fluctuated slightly, and the ripples on the lake spread. The next second, his body had appeared by the lake. Let's go to Huiting right away. You come with me. Gu Fengbo stood up, jumped off the boat, and walked on the water. Monstrous waves shot around him with amazing momentum. At the same time, at the foot of Qingyun Peak of Kunlun Mountain, in the ice and snow thousands of meters above sea level, a figure wrapped in a black cloak appeared at the gate of Kunlun City. He carried a long sword and moved forward slowly. The city gate, which had been destroyed by Wang Tianzong's sword, had been urgently repaired in a few days. The black figure with a long sword looked at the busy figure at the city gate with mockery in his eyes. Who are you? Stop. The guards who repaired the city gate in front of the gate immediately found the black shadow in their sight and shouted loudly. The black shadow continued to move forward. The guards in front of the city gate suddenly became nervous. Dozens of people quickly gathered and said at the same time, Stop. In their sight, the black shadow stopped as expected. However, before the guards could breathe a sigh of relief, the black shadow had already spoken directly. His voice shook the sky, and the wind and snow in the city flew wildly in the fierce sword intent. As his voice spread throughout the city, he said, I'm Saint of Samsara, under the order of the Palace Master. I have a letter for His Highness, the God of War. He reached into his arms and took out an envelope. In the eyes of all the guards who suddenly became nervous, Saint stretched out his hand and waved it. The snow-white envelope instantly cut through the wind and snow. The wind howled, and the sword intent in the city rang. The envelope, like a white flowing light, shot straight to the city gate. There was a loud bang. In the wind and snow, the gate of Kunlun City, which had been urgently repaired, collapsed again. Gravel flew. Saint turned and left peacefully, not in a hurry. Several superiors of the thunder-shocking realm in Kunlun City appeared at the same time. They looked at the envelope on top of a pile of stones, and then at Saint's back, gloomy and silent. Who would want to provoke the first supermaster of Samsara if possible? Skeleton, the thunder-shocking realm expert who had appeared when Wang Tianzong was about to enter the city, hesitated for a moment, reached out to take the envelope and opened it. Only after a glance, his face changed dramatically. Gu Xingyun didn't go to Huiting in person after all. Even Gu Fengbo didn't move. Because just when the two were about to leave, a message swept through every corner of the dark world at the speed of a hurricane. It was a letter from the master of Samsara Palace to the lord of Kunlun City. It was delivered by Saint. When the letter reached Gu Xingyun's ears, it also spread throughout the dark world. The whole dark world was instantly shocked, and the whole world was in an uproar. I heard that Kunlun City's martial arts is unparalleled in the world and is the pillar of martial arts in Jianghu State. I've admired it for a long time, so I came to ask for advice. Your Highness is the God of War of Jianghu State with unparalleled combat capability. You will not disappoint me, a woman. On June 15th, at the Sky Academy, I will wait for your Highness's arrival. I would like to see your Highness's elegant demeanor. I hope your Highness will not miss this opportunity. Swords and sabers have no eyes. I hope your Highness can put aside the worries of life and death and recreate the glory of Kunlun City. Although I am a woman and child, I am willing to let go of everything and discuss the pinnacle of martial arts with your Highness. I will not retreat until I die and will not rest until I die. If your Highness is defeated, I hope that your highness will not be stingy with your head. It's fine if your highness avoids the battle. You can just refer to yourself as a rat from now on. In the future, when I return to the east, I will slaughter the rats and destroy your highness's rat nest. The glory of the Gu family for hundreds of years is tied to your highness. I hope your highness will consider it carefully. Signed by Samsara. They would not retreat until they were dead, and would not rest until they were dead. On June 15th, the Sky Academy. The entire Dark World thought that the master of Samsara Palace was crazy. The entire Dark World was also waiting for Gu Xingyun's reaction. On the same day that Gu Xingyun remained silent. In the northeast of Jianghu State. For the first time in many years, Situ Tsangyue, the hidden god of Jianghu State, walked out of Sai City, Mount Taibai. She challenged Gu Qianquan, the first elder of Kunlun City. It was almost the same wording as the master of Samsara Palace. Chapter 117. As one of the top wealthy families in Jianghu State, the Dongqing clan was extremely prosperous in Dongqing Wudi's generation. Dongqing Hongguang, the old master, also had 5 brothers, but 3 of them died on the battlefield. He and his younger brother, Dongqing Hanjian, had been supporting the huge Dongqing clan. At that time, the Dongqing clan was still a top wealthy and glorious family, but the pressure was not known to outsiders. In Dongqing Wudi's generation, the whole Dongqing clan really blossomed and bore fruit. Dongqing Wudi had 5 siblings, Wudi, Wushuang, Endless and Boundless, and Dongqing Wuqiu. Each of them was a real leader in their respective fields and could take charge of an area on their own. Even his wives and sons-in-law were all talents. Everyone in this generation of the Dongqing clan was not useless. Because of this, the Dongqing clan was now more prosperous than ever. The leader of the Dongqing clan today was Dongqing Wudi, a member of the decision-making committee known as the God of Massacre in Jianghu State. Although he was not a director giant, the only director giant in the giant group often followed Dongqing Wudi's opinion, which showed the status of the Dongqing clan in the giant group. If it weren't for the fact that Dongqing Wudi had no decent men in the next generation and only relied on the 2 sisters, Dongqing Chochi and Dongqing Rushi, the momentum of the Dongqing clan today would be even more amazing. That was really carrying on the past and opening up the future. It was drizzling in Luojing. Tiny raindrops fell on the sky above the ancient capital of the 13 dynasties, beautiful and tranquil. An Audi with a military license plate slowly drove out of the airport and went all the way along the airport expressway. After crossing most of the urban area of Luojing, it went straight to the suburbs at a steady pace. The mountain that symbolized supreme power in Luojing was getting closer and closer. The mountain rain was hazy. There was a vast silence between heaven and earth. On both sides of the mountain road, soldiers in raincoats with loaded guns stood motionless, silent and piercingly cold. The mountain occupied by the Dongqing clan was said to be a military-restricted zone. A regiment of troops was stationed here all year round. From the head of the regiment to each soldier, although the establishment number was under the name of the Zhongyuan military region, the Dongqing clan was responsible for all the living and wages of these veterans transferred from the border Praetorian Corps. It was not an exaggeration to say that this was the Dongqing clan's private army. The Audi with the military license plate passed by the sign engraved with the words, Military Restricted Zone. The 2 rows of veterans guarding the intersection of the mountain road turned around at the same time and gestured for the Audi to stop. The Audi slowly came to a stop. The captain of the veteran squad quickly walked to the driver's seat, and before he could reach out to knock on the window had already rolled down. An extremely burly figure appeared in the captain's line of sight. This was a young man who looked to be in his 30s. He was dressed in a military uniform and had a resolute expression on his face. His body was so huge that it was almost majestic. Even though he was sitting in the car, the captain could clearly sense the other party's surging and suffocating power. The captain glanced at the lieutenant colonel insignia and subconsciously wanted to salute. However, the majestic young man had already slowly said, "Make way. Mrs. Dongqing is in the car." Mrs. Dongqing? The captain was stunned subconsciously. He had been in the Dongqing clan for nearly 5 years and naturally knew the important figures of the Dongqing clan very well. Now several madams of Dongqing seemed to be on the mountain. How could another madam of Dongqing appear here? The captain was still in a daze. The rear window of the Audi had slowly rolled down, and a very soft and gentle voice sounded from the back. Is it old Su? When I went to the border camp, I saw you beside Woody. Woody said that you took a bullet for him on the battlefield? Why were you transferred here from the Border Control Corps? Old Su turned his head in disbelief. In the back of the car, through the rolled-down window, a woman who looked only about 30 years old was looking at him with a smile. This was a woman who could hardly be described as beautiful. If one had to add a word to her, it could only be beautiful. A woman who was so beautiful that people would feel awe. She was dressed in a decent lady's suit and had her hair tied up. Every move she made was indescribably graceful and luxurious. The peonies in Luojing were the best in the world, and she was like the most beautiful peonies in Luojing. She was dignified, elegant, gentle, and kind. Her beautiful face seemed a little haggard, but when her eyes moved, there was only a faint dignity that could make people feel pressure, in addition to amiability. Old Su's whole body trembled with excitement. The rain beat on the raincoat. Pitter-patter. Under the rain, Old Su suddenly stood up straight, saluted and said loudly, "Secretary Bai." The woman nodded gently, coughed, and said with a smile, "I've caught a bad cold recently, so I won't get out of the car. We're on the same side, so there's no need to be so polite, right?" "Yes, yes. Secretary Bai's health is important. You must pay more attention." Old Su nodded repeatedly and spoke almost incoherently. He suddenly turned around, waved his hand and said, "Get out of the way, Secretary Bai is back." Several soldiers immediately got out of the way. The Audi slowly walked past Old Su. When it brushed past the car, Old Su narrowed his eyes. He could vaguely see a young woman who looked somewhat similar to Secretary Bai sitting next to her. She was casually playing with a dagger with a piercing cold glint in her eyes. Old Su shook his head, pulled a soldier over, suppressed the ecstasy in his heart, and said, "Hurry up, call the regimental commander and tell him that Secretary Bai is back. Ask him to tell the old master quickly." In the entire Jianghu state, there was only one Mrs. Dongqing who could be called Secretary Bai. She was an extraordinary woman in the political arena of Jianghu state. She was Dongqing Wudi's wife, but she was not a vassal of Dongqing Wudi. Even when the two stood together, people could also see the sky that belonged to her when they admired the temperament of the god of massacre. Bai Qingqian, the former governor of Qinzhou province in Jianghu state and the current secretary of Guangdong province, used to be the first miss of the Bai family, and now Mrs. Dongqing. Old Su took a deep breath. As a veteran transferred from the Border Control Corps, they had long given their faith and soul to the Dongqing clan. Anything worth being happy about in this top wealthy family was also worth celebrating for them. Bai Qingqian's arrival in the Dongqing clan was a happy event for the entire Dongqing clan. Old Su chuckled foolishly and lit a cigarette. He took a puff happily and felt very comfortable. He had heard the old people here talk about the marriage of their marshal in private. It was said that at the beginning, the marshal and his wife were very loving. They had been attached to each other for several years after they met and got married. His wife was a high-ranking female official with a bright future outside, but at home, she was the most gentle and filial young mistress. She loved her husband, was filial to her parents-in-law, and never had any dissatisfaction. Now the relationship between the marshal and his wife was stable, but it was no longer the same as it was many years ago. According to some veterans who had stayed here for many years ago, for some unknown reason, his wife had a great conflict with Dongqing Hongguang, and even broke up completely. All of a sudden, they were almost incompatible like fire and water, and even his wife's attitude toward the marshal became cold. His wife also moved down the mountain from that time. A few years later, the marshal used some unknown means to ease the relationship with his wife. His wife also came back for a New Year's Eve dinner. Since then, no one had seen his wife come back. Over the years, even if the marshal and his wife met, they were mostly at their respective workplaces. If one counted carefully, this situation had lasted for almost 20 years. No one knew why his wife broke up with the old master, and no one dared to ask. Over time, everything about Bai Qingqian seemed to have disappeared from the mountain of the Dongqing clan. If Bai Qingqian hadn't met Old Su when she went to the Border Control Corps to visit Dongqing Wudi 5 years ago, Old Su wouldn't even have recognized Bai Qingqian. Old Su grinned. For the first time in more than a decade, his wife came home. In any case, this was a good sign. The Audi drove all the way through the lush path in the mountain. The mountains and rivers were hazy, and so was the misty rain. Bai Qingqian silently looked out of the window at the strange and familiar mountain scenery, and said nothing. A woman who seemed to be 25 or 26 years old sat lazily beside Bai Qingqian, casually trimming her nails with a dagger, and said with a smile, "Aunt, the Dongqing clan has changed a lot, hasn't it? I remember I came here once when I was a child, when I was only 11 or 12 years old. After that, you didn't come back here, and I didn't come back either. Ah, by the way, you seemed to come back once later. My father was so angry at that time that he almost came to kill you." The woman's appearance looked similar to Bai Qingqian's. Sitting together, they looked like a pair of charming sisters, but their temperaments were completely opposite. Bai Qingqian seemed to have a kind of graceful and noble atmosphere and gentleness at any time, while the woman sitting next to Bai Qingqian only gave people a clear feeling of coldness and danger. It was a kind of almost overwhelming momentum, which made it easy for people to ignore that she was actually very beautiful. Bai Yuming of the Bai family in Yuzhou, known as the Little God of Massacre, was the niece of Bai Qingqian, the top leader of Yuzhou City, the eldest daughter of Bai Zhanfeng, a member of the decision-making committee, and the first miss of the Bai family. This year, first Miss Bai, who was nearly 33 years old, was still alone. She did not attract countless young talents like her aunt did in the past. She even rarely appeared in public, but in the eyes of some real big shots, Bai Yuming was a very important figure. At the age of 33, she was an expert who was about to enter the peak of the thunder-shocking realm in the stabilization phase, and was as famous as Wang Xiaoyao of the Wang family of Beihai. Just this point alone was enough to prove that she was extremely talented. Bai Yuming was not called Bai Yuming before. Only a few people knew that the ghostly name Yuming came from the mouth of Great Master Wu Wei, the most respected old monk in Zhongzhou State, and it was Great Master Wu Wei who personally came to give her a name. This honor could not be refused by the Bai family at all. What's more, what Great Master Wu Wei said when he gave her a name was somewhat shocking, so the Bai family had to accept this extremely strange name. This woman is extremely lucky, but when she reaches the peak, she will decline. She will die early, so she should be buffered by Yin Qi. The word Yuming is the most suitable. This was the original words of Great Master Wu Wei. Since then, the name Bai Yuming had been fixed. Now Bai Yuming, who was 33 years old, had been very smooth since she was a child. Although she was not famous in Yuzhou, in the dark world, the title of Little God of Massacre was extremely resounding. Her progress in martial arts seemed to indicate that she was extremely lucky. "Aunt, do you remember you took me here to play when I was a child? There seems to be a water garden on the mountain, right? Let's go and have a look later." Bai Yuming looked at Bai Qingqian, who was silent, and continued to say with a smile. Bai Qingqian shook her head and said softly, "I have long forgotten where it is." They had not contacted each other for more than 10 years. Not to mention the water garden, she could hardly remember where the old man lived. Bai Yuming sighed softly and said no more. It had always been a mystery why her aunt broke up with the old master of the Dongqing clan over the years. Even when she returned to her parents' home, no matter how her father asked, her aunt refused to say a word. If it were not for her aunt's unchanged attitude in supporting the Dongqing clan, perhaps the Bai family and the Dongqing clan, the two pillar families of the giant group, would have publicly broken up. You're tuning in to the Wisdom Diary YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.